5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Walk with me through the cellar door.
The storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
And welcome back to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We have an amazing episode. Look, I've already got 2 in for those at home playing the drinking game. We are on episode 47. We are epically close to our 1-year anniversary. Right, Hannah? We really are, aren't we? We're so close. We can smell and taste that 1-year anniversary.
I'm pretty sure it tastes like Jaeger. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. I think we were sober the first episode, weren't we?
I'm pretty sure we were. We may have been. We may have been a little bit stressed, a little bit. First time back in a long time when we started this back up.
Yes. And so the best part about that is if you want to get in on the 1-year anniversary show, if you have a comment or anything, send an email to cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook /cellardoorskeptics and let us know what you want to hear, what you want to see, what you want to think. Now, don't tell us what you want to think. Just tell us what you do.
We could make it the viewer requested show, like Mythbusters or something. Like, tell us something weird you want us to find out about.
Yeah, and we're all for that. We love doing that research. So tonight we have a kind of a 2-part type episode. So the first segment that we're going to be doing is going to be with somebody I met online. And she runs a small group that utilizes SMART Recovery, a secular alcohol and narcotics recovery group. And I thought that would be a good conversation because that is a topic that's interesting to me based on my past life experiences with friends and personal experiences. And I wanted to have this conversation because next week, as long as everything goes through, we have a young lady coming on who went through some very bad circumstances and decided that God helped save her life. So I thought this would be a good alternative, a good science-based discussion, because that's what SMART Recovery does. They talk about the science behind everything. And I thought it would be a good conversation to have so that we can give any viewers next week or listeners next week an opportunity to go back and listen to something that complements it. We're also then going to talk with a friend of ours who has criticized us for not having a pro-gun individual on the show. So he's going to come present his book and his case, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different sides of the gun control debate for the third fucking time. And I promise this will be the last time we talk about gun control unless some other major event happens.
Which is probably inevitability. But either way, I mean, we like to talk politics and current events, so we'll probably talk about this again in the future. But this is going to be like a philosophical argument about the gun debate with someone who is on the other side. So we're going to have a little bit more round conversation. Because I'm in the middle of this. I'm not.
That's because you're a Trump supporter. That's why.
I'm a hunter and all that kind of stuff.
You love Trump, don't you?
I've got Trump. I've got the Trump Willie hair in my back, and I'm going to get a tattoo of an American flag on my forehead.
Oh my God! Are you going to build a wall too?
Right between my eyes.
Anyway, without any further ado, please welcome to the program a friend of mine, Christina Kopka. Christina, welcome to the show. How are you tonight, ma'am?
I am wonderful. How are you guys doing?
Oh, we're doing amazing. I think it's an inside joke if you haven't heard the show before. I say amazing. It's like one of my gimmick words or something like that, and Hannah calls me out on it. It drives them nuts.
We call it a linguistic crutch.
Oh, okay. Okay. Very cool.
So anyway, so we wanted to have you do the show because you run a small group out of Detroit, and we are a Michigan-based podcast. We like to talk with local people as much as we can. Recently, we've had on a Democratic Senate, I think it's Senate nominee, right, Hannah?
He's running for Congress.
Congress. Fuck you.
Second district.
anyway, so we try and focus in Michigan. And when I saw you post in one of the groups, I thought, hey, can I have a conversation with you about this? This is an area that we really haven't touched much on the show. And I thought it would be a good conversation to get into.
Right.
So
I don't remember what I posted either.
I don't. You posted something about how if you have anybody in this area that wants to join, we have this wonderful group that starts on this specific time, blah, blah, blah.
All right. I was pushing my group. All right.
You were, which is okay because it felt familiar because I push my podcast a lot, just not in that group. But so I was like, hey, I know what that person's doing. But hey, you support a group that sounds extremely interesting, something we want the listeners to know more about. Because even if they're not struggling, they may know others that are.
Oh, I'm sure we all do.
Yes. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because this is a newer program to me. I'm not very familiar with this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about SMART Recovery?
Okay, so SMART is an acronym. It loves its acronyms. It stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training. And the key is in that title. It's self-management. That makes it very different from standard programs like the 12-step groups. There's no sponsors. There's, you're all on your own because at the end of the day, you're in charge of you. You're the one who's got to make the decision. So why not teach yourself how to actually think? It's science-based. It's all like evidence-based. It uses a form of psychotherapy that falls in the CBT category. Do you guys know what that is?
No, we'll let you tell us.
Okay. It is cognitive behavioral therapy. And within that spectrum, there's other different models of behavior. SMART focuses on one of the CBTs called REBT. Like I said, acronyms. We like them.
I don't like Hanna loves Trump. Oh, that's not an acronym. HLT. There we go.
Yeah, and I might stumble upon or across the meanings occasionally because there's so many. REBT is rational emotive behavior therapy, basically linking together your thoughts, your behaviors, your philosophies in life, and your feelings and how it all kind of interacts with each other. And they have all these tools that help you kind of figure everything out on your own. Like anybody can do the program. You don't need a facilitator. You don't need to go to meetings. They help if you have questions and want to learn stuff, but it's not necessary. And it's the motto for SMART, and what drove me to using the program was what caught my attention was their motto: embrace the power of choice. It's all about choice. So no facilitator that I know of is going to sit there and tell you, you have to do this, you have to do that, you must do it this way, this is the only way. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with very many goings on in the recovery community, but those are very familiar sentiments.
Yes.
To a lot of people. I get told that a lot. I've been kicked out of many Facebook groups because I argue that so much.
Well, we know that feeling. We've been kicked out of a lot of groups ourselves. But the one thing I like about this whole approach, it seems like, is you're using updated information, new psychological and therapy, and basically the science of the mind, things we've learned, and you're kind of dealing with the whole person. It seems like it's got a nice round approach dealing with the whole person's life, as opposed to like trying to just corner, I guess, or corral and like fight or overcome something, as opposed to trying to deal with the entire situation.
Right. And that's what it does. It teaches they kind of just teach you how to change different thought patterns. You are taught to recognize when you're being irrational and sort of learn how to put into place more rational, more helpful ways of thinking. There's one of the most basic tools we have is a word swap, where a common thing that people in recovery say is, I can't use, I can't drink, I can't get high. But the reality is you absolutely can. So that's not a realistic statement. And also it takes away your responsibility and your power by saying that. So
that's true. I never thought about that like that.
Yeah. Can't. It's the victim mentality is rampant in many, many programs and many people. I mean, it's kind of standard procedure for an addict. Poor me. So, and SMART helps to empower you to get out of that. And it helps you recognize when you're thinking that way so that you can adjust your thought patterns and your perspectives and your beliefs. So a more powerful, more effective statement and a more realistic one, instead of I can't use, is just to simply say I don't. Therein lies all of your power.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes out the victim mentality. And it's just simple little things like that SMART uses to help you become far more self-efficient.
And so when we look at the website, one of the big things it talks about is a 4-point recovery program.
Yes.
And they talk about different tools and things like that. So I'm going to go through the 4 points real quick, and then maybe you can kind of give us a highlight of what each one means. So the first one is building and maintaining motivation. Point 2 is coping and urges. Point 3 is managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And point 4 is living a balanced life.
Right. The 4 points, pretty much any person is working on those, and not just addicts. Any person in general has to deal with these issues. You might not be an addict, but I'm sure somebody has an urge to buy the Snickers bar in line at the grocery store.
Or how about the piece of pizza? Or a whole pizza in the middle of the night.
Throw punching somebody every 3 seconds. They're all urges. That's what I struggle with nowadays. That's my big thing. I have urges to cause severe violence to people.
Or check your Reddit post to see if you got any upvotes.
So the tools are broken down into those categories, and many of them will fall, all over. And any person at any given time will generally be focusing on one of those 4 points. And hopefully you get to a point where you're graduated from the program and you're focusing on lifestyle balance. The points are pretty self-explanatory. I think the first one, balance, or maintaining motivation to abstain. Usually that one and the coping with urges are mostly going to be people, fresh out of rehab, very raw, still new. And that's what they're focusing on. They can't even get to lifestyle balance right now because they're just focusing on not picking up. So my groups, we do a lot of talking about those two because my group is in a rehab. The managing thoughts, feelings, and behaviors is something everybody needs to learn how to do. This isn't just for addicts. That's the great thing about it, because we all have thoughts and feelings and behaviors. So
that's true.
Well,
we did a segment. I don't know how it's got to have been like 4 months or 5 months ago. I went to a seminar for my work. They sent me to this class, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be bullshit," because most work stuff's bullshit. But they talked about retraining your RAS, which is retraining basically your impulse mentality, because a lot of us have a comfort zone we want to live in, and then we feed that through whatever we use to comfort. So for me, it's pizza. If you were to walk in, I'm having a bad day. If I eat a piece of pizza, I feel better, flat out.
Right.
I gain a lot of weight from that, but
it's not the pizza. That. You can't blame the pizza.
It's not the pizza. Trust me, it's not. It's because I can't stop eating the damn pizza because it tastes so good.
Well, for anyone that doesn't remember what the RAS is, it's the reticular activating system, and it's basically the ancient areas that are brain are crucial for survival. And so just adjusting and changing that stuff. You can check out the old episode that we did. It was a lot of fun. I think we talked a lot of garbage about each other, and then we also talked about some of the changes that Chris did, because he worked on it for like a month or something like that.
Yeah, I did. I did a scientific experiment, or as much of a scientific experiment as you want to call it. But I did do that on purpose because I wanted to see if the guy was full of shit.
I'm guessing that those types of things, like that kind of test experiment results, is the kind of stuff that SMART uses or looks at to say, hey, is this a valid thing that we should incorporate into our system to make it better?
Absolutely. I don't know all the specifics as to how each tool got brought into the program. I only know that the REBT stuff was created in the 50s by one of the most influential psychotherapists in the industry. I mean, even today, Albert Ellis is known as one of the most influential therapists of all time, beating out Sigmund Freud. So He knows his shit. So I have some faith in that. And if you look through any of the tools and reading them, you kind of start to notice that there are things that your brain already does. It just kind of the program helps you strengthen these things. Like there's a CBA, which is a cost benefits analysis, and all it is a pros and cons list. And who doesn't make pros and cons lists in their head?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I nowadays use it for whether or not I should buy the Lucky Charms instead of whether or not I should get high. But it's still, that's the cool thing about the tools is you can pretty much use them for anything in life. So it's very transferable on top of being very helpful with battling addiction, and not just addiction. It was originally started to help with depression.
See, and that would be
That's
something
so
in my realm I struggle with is extreme depression. And I have I'll go through days where everything will be fine, and the next day everything just goes downhill.
Right.
And back in the day, that's used to be what caused some of the large consumption of alcohol that I used to intake, and some of the other narcotics I used to intake was based on my mood swings and where I was at.
Right. There is a lot of similarities between depression and addiction, and they kind of almost go hand in hand. I mean, not for everybody. I don't have issues with depression, but so many people do, and that caused them to drink or to use, or vice versa. They used and they started screwing up their lives, so they started to get depressed. So it's kind of one of those things that goes hand in hand with each other. But yeah, the REBT and stuff like that was originally designed to help heal depression and anxiety, and that's when they started realizing the similarities between the two, because the thought processes and the behaviors are very much the same.
Yeah. And before we get any further, just so the audience knows, and we'll post this in the description, they actually have what's called a tool chest, and they have tons and tons of information on here. I mean, just like all over this, and it's not like they're like, "Hey, we want to bill you $7,000 to download these things." You know,
they're free. That's cool. It's an all nonprofit, and they really want to help. That all the tools that are downloadable on the website are free. Pretty much the only thing that you need to pay for is if you want to order a book.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the tools from the book are right there on that website, and there are so many, and you don't have to use all of them. That's the cool thing. You get to pick and choose which ones work for you and which ones don't.
Awesome.
So
let's switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
and I guess if you don't feel comfortable sharing anything, all you have to do at any point is just say, "Hey, I don't want to share this," or
I have no modesty. You
okay. Well, good. Well, good then. Everybody likes an uncandid individual. So, tell us a little bit how you got involved with Smart Recovery. So, was it a group that you started because of something that you felt passionate about? Is it personal experiences? Tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how Smart Recovery came into your life.
Okay, well, my background typically is pretty standard. I was a junkie for several years and landed myself in jail. I think that kind of par for the course when you're sticking a needle in your arm. So I ended up, after jail, coming down to an outpatient program in Plymouth. And of course, most rehabs in general expect you to go to a certain number of meetings every week. And they, the standard is the 12-step programs. Mm-hmm. And I went to a couple to try to get my sheet signed, and I'm sitting in these meetings listening to the steps, and I never could get past the first two. That is the surrendering and admitting that you're powerless. I'm a Marine raised by military men. And so surrendering and powerlessness are not in my vocabulary. No one is going to tell me that I am not the most powerful being in my universe.
That's good.
Because I'm arrogant.
Some call it narcissistic. I got called narcissistic the other day.
Not narcissistic. I realize there's other people, and it doesn't revolve around me, but I'm the one who influences my life and my situation. So you're the most powerful person in your universe. Each person is the most powerful person. Who else is going to affect change in your life?
I can see how your group would be good. You're making my ego feel very good right now.
Oh, I had an ego long before SMART. So I went to a couple of these meetings. I tried, and I couldn't jive with it. I can see how they could be helpful, but they're just not at all for me. And I went into my counselor's office and I said, listen, this ain't going to fucking happen. We need to figure something else out because I need to complete and you want me to go to meetings to complete. So help me find something else. And we just did a Google search for alternative to 12-step programs. And the first one that came up was SMART Recovery. And we looked through it a little bit and it kind of made sense to me. It clicked in my brain, the logical thinking of it. Not so much the self-empowerment aspect. I mean, that helps, obviously, but just the cold, hard logic, science behind it, it just clicked in my head. Mm-hmm. So I went to a meeting and I enjoyed it. It took me a minute before I would contribute or talk or anything because I just was kind of scoping it out. And put my little feelers out, but I kind of got hooked. So mm-hmm. I started learning more about it, going to all the meetings I could get to, and I did facilitator training. And now I run my own group. Mm-hmm. And now I kind of am an advocate for choice and recovery because when some of the people that I was in the rehab with found out that I wasn't doing a 12-step program, I got a lot of shit. NA is the only way. If you're not doing it this way, you're going to fail. And needless to say, most of those people are back out on the street, and I'm here living a wonderful fucking life.
Hey, they tell you, and I don't know the exact statistics, so maybe I shouldn't say the exact statistic, but they actually say there is a very high failure rate out of AA and NA groups. And it's higher out of NA than AA.
There is. And there's a new book that just came out. I can't remember the name, but it's been all over Facebook, at least in the recovery groups. It has been something about bad science or busting the science of AA or something like that. Mm-hmm. And the author basically says that 12-step programs only really help about 5% of the people. It's really hard to get numbers because you don't hear from the people who go back out there.
Nope. Because they don't want anyone to know.
Right. And then it's a really hard community to get statistics on because for one, if people aren't using a program, you very rarely hear from them. Mm-hmm. If they're back out on the street, you don't hear from them. So it's hard to get numbers.
Well, my thought's that the 12-step programs are kind of like the way we used to deal with addiction. So if you talk to someone who says, well, the way we used to deal with depression was, listen, buddy, life isn't bad. You should just dig yourself out of that rut, get a good job and work hard and be happy. Well, right. It doesn't work that way. And the AA programs are something that were created when that was the level of psychology that the United States on average was using to try to help people with addiction. We've moved on from that. Science has moved on, and the SMART recovery program seems to be the next logical step.
It is logical. And the interesting thing about SMART is it keeps itself relevant. There is no hard and fast absolutes. When the science changes, SMART adapts its program. They're not going to tout something and be, this is the only way. Or say, this is what we said 10 years ago. No, if there's new information, we're going to teach the new information. If that's, the right thing. Mm-hmm. But just because something is status quo doesn't mean it's right. At one point in time, the status quo was hanging women as witches and burning them. I could go on with that. So,
yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing is because a little personal information about, 7 years ago, I got pulled over on the way out to Chicago. Mm-hmm. And the person driving had just bought the vehicle, threw a cigarette out, hit the cop car. Well, we didn't know her boyfriend at the time had warrants for his arrest. We had no clue about this. And we were good friends with this guy. We had no clue this dude had warrants. Anyway, come to find out, he lies to the cop. Well, guess what? They searched the car. We've got marijuana on us.
Oh.
And so I got busted. So basically, I was the one that had the hard evidence. Everybody else, except for the guy in the front seat, was able to conceal it. He was in the back of the cop car, and he refused to take the downfall. He lied to the cop full out, tried to blame it on me. And I was like, dude, it's in your cigarette pack. I don't even smoke cigarettes anymore. But anyway, so long story short, I had to go through the whole system. And they put you through this assessment thing. And I remember I had to go to this assessment, and they stand there, they watch you pee, and they're like, we got to talk about this. And then they sit you for this assessment of questions, and they ask you, when did you start drinking? Well, I started at 15 years old. Oh, well, how much did you drink? I don't know, a drink a month or something like that. And basically, because I was 23 or 24 and I had progressed and it took more to consume than it did before, he decided I was an alcoholic. And because I'm sitting in his office and I had to pay fines, that, it's now harmful to my life. Therefore, you now got to go to this intervention class that was 2 months long, twice a week after work, every Tuesday and Thursday, I think it was.
So, yeah, because drinking at 23 and 24 isn't normal at all.
Yeah. I mean, if they knew anything about my prior life, they could maybe make that assessment on other things, but not just based on that bullshit questionnaire that was meant to fund pockets.
Right, and that's what a lot of issues are, and that's a huge factor in the disease versus not disease debate. How else would you get money by other than calling something a disease? You get a lot of money when you use that word, so a lot of people think that is the only reason it's actually considered a disease. So again, SMART doesn't get on that debate, but it's interesting. A lot of things have to, especially in mental health industry, have a lot to do with lining pockets, and so you got to really watch out for that kind of stuff, and make sure that something that you're doing is really going to be helpful for you and not for somebody else.
Yep. And that was the thing that turned me off about AA, because when I went into my first class, they basically said, yep, you had to pay X amount of dollars, and I'll tell you what, we offer a refund if you join AA classes. And I'm like, I'm not even here for alcohol, goddamn it. I got busted with half a gram of marijuana, for Christ's sake. I'm not even enough to deal. Like, it's just a waste. It was a little bit for a concert, but that was the problem. Is they just enroped all these to saw some money, and basically they wanted me to go to these AA programs to get out of some of what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how the 12-step programs got to be such tight bed buddies with our judicial system. I mean, Oakland County Court has ATC where you have to go to 12-step programs. They won't accept anything else, and I'm not sure how they get away with doing that. So that's
I don't know
one
either.
of the things that I do is, advocate for more options for stuff like that.
So, and that's actually why we wanted to have you on, is because we want to help try and raise awareness for SMART recovery.
Okay.
And we want to do that because we do see that problem. And we've tackled this on other episodes. I worked for Decriminalize GR for a little while, petitioning, getting signatures, trying to get that put on the ballot to decriminalize marijuana. And not as much because we don't feel that's a drug, but because people were being prosecuted as minorities and it was being used to ruin people's lives for marijuana. And that my problem with that is that people just aren't looking at the science behind it, and everybody's so far in bed with each other that it's not even funny. And if we were to break down some of this and say, okay, this is a low risk, therefore we're not going to prosecute, do anything about it. Let's go after, people that are stealing. And then, like my thing is whether addiction is specifically, something that's a disease or whether it is something people are choosing to do, it still becomes part of our national health to want to help take care of people. And I'm a big socialist, and anybody listening to the show will know that, is I'm very pro offering free addiction and recovery. But at this time, I can't advocate for that because the only place the government looks at is AA and NA. And I hate them.
It is changing. It's slow. Change is slow. Progress sometimes takes forever. But it's becoming less and less the norm as a lot of these newer mental health professionals learn all these other things. And SMART is, like I said, a leading alternative. The science behind it, even if you don't use SMART Recovery, the science behind it is making a huge breakthrough in the mental health community, and not just for addiction. It helps with so many things. And there's a guy who comes to my group just because he wants to learn to make better decisions. It has nothing to do with addiction. It's just the process that we use. It helps with critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's kind of necessary, especially in today's world, to be able to learn how to think for yourself and not, be a fun little sheep.
That's true.
For the ways of the world.
So, as we
Better
wrap
stay
up,
away from Fox News if you want to think for yourself.
except for you, Hanna, you really like Trump, so.
Yeah, I got a Fox News IV. I stick it in my neck when I go to bed at night.
So, as we wrap up, we don't want to take too much of your time up. I'm looking at the local meetings, and just within my radius, I think it goes up to 175 miles.
Yes.
There's over 140 public groups in the Michigan area within 175 miles, and that's just within me. I don't know anybody else's zip code to test out how many are actually in Michigan, but there's at least a minimum of 140, and I'm going to guess that number probably triples if we were to search all of Michigan. So that's exciting. So, Christina, as we wrap up, tell everybody a little bit about your group, how they can get a hold of you or your group, and what's the best way they can do to get involved with SMART Recovery.
So my meetings are on Tuesday nights at 5:30, and they're at a rehab called Personalized Nursing Lighthouse, and the address is 575 South Main Street. And just so everybody knows, I play games and throw candy at people in the group, so it's fun. we have a lot of fun, and there's a lot of swearing, but we do work and we learn the tools, and because you can laugh and deal with issues of life. And then, if you don't mind, there's one other meeting that I would kind of like to push as well. It's a friends and family, which is the smart version of Al-Anon. And that's also on Tuesdays in Plymouth. And I don't know the exact address. It's at St. Kenneth Church on Haggerty Road. And that's at 7 p.m. And that is a great, great group to go to for anybody in recovery.
Awesome.
Not just the friends and family members. There's a lot of good information there. And the facilitator for that is Peggy Dara, and all the information for contact is on the website.
Okay.
And anybody can call me at any time. And my phone number is 734-536-9174.
All right. Now you may get weird calls. It's not our fault.
It's I work with addicts. Okay. Weird is what I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christina, for joining us tonight. It was a pleasure to talk to you about Smart Recovery. And we hope anybody listening will be able to go out and support them. I believe there's a donation link right on their website. So anybody that wants to donate is more than welcome to head out there and to donate. So everybody listening, the whole point of this segment was to have that conversation, was to bring an alternative to AA and to NA. And so we're very excited that there's other alternatives coming about and that are happening. So make sure you go out of your way. Please support, donate, do anything you can. And when we come back after this quick commercial break, we're going to be talking about gun control with DJ Stu. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door to Skeptics.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're
Promoting secular feminism. And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
What's something I could do with a very sexy lady friend of mine that people would find provocative, interesting, and entertaining enough to tune in week after week? Oh, I know. A podcast. If you'd like to hear me and Kate be provocative and thought-provoking week after week, join us on the Unbuckling the Bible Belt podcast. We'd love for you to be part of our audiological three-way.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Dude. Haha, welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around through that first segment. Yeah, it was a little long, but we thought it was a really good segment. We just didn't want to cut it out this week because, well, A, we want to give you variety. We really do. And B, we just love what they're doing. They are doing so much with Smart Recovery. And at some point, hopefully, maybe we'll get somebody in that runs the show. You never know. But anyway, we're coming back. We're talking more about gun control. I think this is the third episode that we've dedicated at least one segment to doing that. And we have a dear friend of ours, Stu, who wants to join us to have that conversation because he runs CWC classes. He's a certified instructor through the NRA. And he thinks that there is a lot of evidence out there that we've overlooked. And so we wanted to have a round conversation. So if you're listening to this and you're pro-gun and you're like, I don't want to listen to those cocksuckers fucking, talk about how they hate guns again, make sure you stay tuned because Stu's going to try and give you some points that you can use when you argue with other people like us. And for those of you who are like, hey, I've already heard all this before, I think Stu's got some points to make that even though I'm a little biased and probably will tell you that I don't agree with some of them, he has some points to make, and I want everybody to have to hear both sides because we wouldn't be skeptical and we wouldn't be cellar door skeptics unless we presented both sides of the arguments. So without further ado, what we want to do is bring on our friend Stu, or if you want to call him DJ Stu, whatever floats your boat, because he's a DJ in his personal life. This is his hobby. And anyway, so let's without further ado, let's bring Stu on to talk about gun control. How are you tonight, Stu?
Excellent. I've been having a pretty good week. Picked up a new little vehicle. Going to school, it's an outright blast. Life couldn't be better.
Yeah, and you can't pass up the school thing, right? Because I mean, it's not like you're dead, so you could still learn all the way up until you're dead. So you might as well learn as much as you can. I'll
tell you what, people keep telling me what I should feel like at 59. I'm like, I'm not feeling it. I'm just as fired up as I ever have been. And this is the first time I've actually gotten training outside of my fields of interests. But I'll tell you, when I heard about when I got my first massage and heard about what's behind it all, it just lit my hair on fire. I have to know everything there is to know about it now. So, age of 59, I'm starting a new career.
Cool. You can't pass that up. Sometimes maybe I need a new career too. But anyway, so we know Stu because we were involved with the Michigan Atheist Group, and Stu's been involved with Michigan Atheists for longer than probably I've been alive. So we'll just put it that way. I don't know
if I'd say that, but I was friends with Arlene Marie and George, and boy, we had a fun time hanging out at the convention.
We did
a couple years back, and that was a really good time.
Hopefully they have another convention this year because I miss those because Michigan doesn't have enough of those. And that's one of my biggest gripes is, so coming from a religious background personally, I can't tell you how much I do enjoy some of that, right? I wouldn't want that every week, but once or twice a month, and then you add a little bit of alcohol into it, and it's a really fun time. I mean, I think we hung out till 2 a.m, 1 or 2 a.m. that Saturday.
Hour like that, yeah. Yeah. And we don't have to limit our alcohol to those little bitty cups. We get the whole bottle.
Yes, that's true. We do.
Well, even coming from a non-religious background, I'm down for a party. I'm okay with that. Like,
I never bring the tunes.
There you go. See, and so we met Stu out on the east side of the state, and as everybody knows, we're from the west side. but we don't have rival gangs or anything. We may have rival
Saeed.
opinions, but it has nothing to do with where we're located in Michigan. But I think the whole point of this conversation is to bring a different elements of the show. So as skeptics, we want to talk to other people that have different opinions. We talk to Christians all the time. So why not bring somebody on that has a different political view than us? And we thought, who better than to have that conversation with than our friend Stu? So
and
Stu,
I really don't know if our political view is all that different. I think there's just certain points that we might
That's
clash
probably
on.
what I would agree with, too.
Yeah.
Chris likes that binary 0-1 attack on some of my stuff here. Keeps telling me that I'm Trump because I'm
he
just
is Trump.
a
He
little
likes
different
just
than
so
him.
everybody understands at home. I have pictures of Hanna and Make America Great hats again.
I
He
have
loves
pictures
it.
of me.
My
at
hearing
the,
aids were poking out the sides, and my socialized health care was keeping them working.
There you go. I got pictures of me at the Reason rally with a "Make America Secular Again" sign.
There you go. So Stu, before we get into this, because what we want to do is we're going to intro your premise in a second. But why don't you tell everybody about what you do and how they can get a hold of you? Because I know you have a book, so I want you to promo your book a little bit. Tell everybody a little bit about your book. Tell them a little bit about your career and your other actual what you make a living on.
Right. Well, besides being a DJ and a budding massage therapist, I became an NRA certified firearms instructor 3 or 4 years ago. And I've been involved with firearms in one way or another since I was 12 or 13. I can't remember. It was that changing of the age, and I can't remember if it was my 12th or 13th birthday. My mother bought me my first revolver, which wasn't weird back then. You know, it was the 60s.
You'll shoot your eye out.
Yeah. Everybody, all my friends had one. And, nobody shot up schools and none of that garbage. Anyway, but she taught me some of the things that I use to this very day to keep myself safe and to, handle firearms safely and what have you. And over the years, things have gotten so political. And I researched the topic when about the mid-90s, I got back into firearms. I had taken a break and sold them all when I needed money. And I got back into them about the mid-90s when it turned out that DJs were being targeted for theft, armed robbery, bands, DJs, and limo drivers, apparently. We kept seeing things on the news that they were being attacked and robbed, and one got shot. And I remember sitting in my bedroom where we have our TV, and my wife and I are eating dinner, and a story came on about a DJ who had, taken his roadies out for an after-gig lunch or breakfast, whatever you do in the middle of the night. And I would do that frequently too. And back then, when cell phones were rare and expensive, he didn't have one, but he did see someone sniffing around his trailer outside in the parking lot. So he went out and confronted him, and they shot him dead and stole his keys and took his stuff. And my wife looked at me and she goes, how you were talking about maybe getting back into firearms and checking into a concealed permit? I think it's time. And so I learned everything I needed to know, and I bought my first semi-auto. And when I brought it into the house, I still believed that myth that a gun in your home increases the likelihood of you being killed. It's more likely to kill you than an assailant, because that's been what we've been told. We're told that time and again, and nobody seems to question that. Matter of fact, it seems kind of logical. If you introduce a gun, chances of it going off, if you don't have one, are zero. So I just accepted it blindly, and then people started, you started having these conversations like we had at the convention. And, I started, now we have the internet. And I started reading up on things and exploring and digging. And I found out a whole lot of stuff that just was a revelation to me. And I started talking to people about it, and they all thought I was crazy. Or the biggest reaction I would get is, why haven't I heard this anywhere else? And my favorite time was when I went to a town hall meeting. It was over here in St. Clair Shores, and so it's really close to my house. And Sandra Levin was going to be there, and I couldn't resist. It was so close, and I didn't have anything to do that night, so I went over there, and I thought I'd sit in, maybe ask a few questions. And that was when the recession was really taking hold. So most of the people there wanted to talk about jobs and unemployment and stuff. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to stay out of this. But some knucklehead up on the front row started grilling Sander Levin about his voting record on gun rights and all that stuff. And of course, he went off into the usual red herrings about, well, maybe we should have bazookas and tanks and nukes and all that stuff. So anyway, the guy up front also made the mistake of using some jargon that we tend to use within the community, and he called the senator anti-gun. I don't like to use that because, I mean, it's kind of a silly term, but
so, hold on.
The lady next to me,
why do you find that a silly term?
Well, because I think most people are anti-violence. Most people are anti-gun misuse. You know, they want our soldiers to have guns. They want our police to have guns. They want authorized people to have guns. They might not want one themselves. They might outright hate them. But, you know, to say someone's anti or pro-gun, we know it is to be a political thing, right? You're pro-gun rights. You could add the word rights, and that sets it straight. But anyway, he used that word, and the lady next to me said, well, you know, I think I'm anti-gun. And I asked her, I said, are you really anti-gun, meaning that you don't want police or, say, a senior citizen to have a gun to defend themselves against a home invader? Or are you anti-violence? And she thought about it for a minute. And I didn't notice, but the people around us had tuned in because we were kind of in the back. And they were listening to us. And she looked at me and she goes, you know, I think that's it. I'm anti-violence. And I said, you know, I am too. I'm Stu. I'm an NRA instructor. And everyone, you know, when the senator was done with his talk and everyone went up to ask him questions, I had a bigger crowd around me asking me stuff. And it was kind of a neat situation. I never had a group so intently interested in hearing what I had to say. And again, I got a lot of, why haven't I heard this anywhere else? So I thought I'd put it in book form, and I wrote a book. Gosh, it's probably about 2013 now. Is it already? Maybe, yeah. And it's called Knowing Guns, the ins and outs of firearms and firearm politics for the uninitiated. But just think Knowing Guns. That was the main title. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all that stuff. And you might have to look up my name because it's not on the New York Times bestseller list, and it never will be. But it does give me
too many F-bombs, sir.
Exactly. It gives me the ability when people start asking me a barrage of questions, and especially if I don't have time, I can take it and go, here you go, read this, and then if there's anything that didn't get answered, then come back and we'll talk.
Well, so I actually agree with you. I mean, if you think about it, at some point, in terms of if we want to talk about how we're on the same page, I have that conversation about evolution quite a bit. It's very frustrating to have to talk with people about evolution when they're in their different realm, right? They're like, yeah, evolution doesn't exist. Well, hold on. Do you understand how your life works? Do you understand that evolution applies to all these different things? And I'll be honest, I've done that many a times. I've taken in and said, okay, here you go. Here's my compiled links. Here you go. Merry Christmas.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
You read these, come back to me in a couple years, and we'll talk about it.
Well, it's shocking the basic lack of understanding of biology. If you know, I'm in massage therapy, and they've folded that into the medical field. And these days, there's so much more intense training you have to take, and we're taking anatomy and physiology. And I'm standing there in front of one of our skeletons, and I'm going, just look at this skeleton for a minute and tell me that any engineer would sign off on this, having the entire upper portion of your body supported by a 3-inch, in some spots, piece of bone. Everything that you lift, everything you carry, everything you move upstairs, all pivoting on this one focal point. It's no secret that that's why we're massaging the sacrum more than any other body part. So, so to me, I mean, you just look at the human body, and yes, it's astounding. It's outright ingenious in the way that it works. But if an engineer signed off on that, they'd lose their job.
I would.
Yeah.
I know why it would. Maybe a civil engineer could get by. I've seen Michigan bridges. They're pretty low on the totem pole lately.
They'd
but
be sending
no.
bottled water. Yeah.
So anyway, so one of the things that you brought up, and we are going to take a commercial break here in a few seconds, but you brought up a premise, and I wanted to elate on it, and I want you to expound on it, because I think we're going to talk about it here after we come back from the commercial break.
Okay.
Your premise for the whole conversation here is gun control, and you put it in parentheses, is too often a magic talisman to the gun fearful, and it has a terrible track record of inefficiency. So I'm going to go ahead and let you spend a couple of minutes elating on exactly what that means.
I'll do that. Okay. Well, gun control, I hear people say, well, I want more gun control. Well, saying the words gun control is kind of a broad thing. It's like saying we want more law. Well, what law specifically would you like? There are several thousand laws that regulate guns, both at the state and federal level. Everything from the billet that it's made out of in the manufacturing plant, through every step of manufacture, through transfer to the dealer. The advertising is regulated. Transfers are regulated. Specifications are regulated. Use is regulated. Storage is regulated. Final disposal is regulated. I don't know what more people think we should do. They think there's no regulation, because that's another one of those things we believe on faith. The media tells us, we're the Wild West. There's no restrictions on guns. What I think they're really mad about is that we have some freedom to use them, that they want them gone. I mean, it's like the people who talk about there's a heaven and they've gone to a better place, yet they're really sad. If they really believed in heaven and they believed their loved one went to a better place, then they would be elated. And by the same token, these people who think, oh, I respect the Second Amendment, I just want more gun control. No, you don't. You want guns gone. It really is what you want. When they did the assault weapons ban, I remember back in the 90s, during the Clinton administration, they did the assault weapons ban. And they made these certain features that they thought constituted an assault weapon. They're meaningless. They're mostly cosmetic. But senators went through a catalog, a firearms catalog, and they said, oh, that's assault weapony. That's scary looking. That's going to be one of the features. You can't have a folding stock. That makes it an assault weapon. Oh, a flash hider. That's evil. We got to get rid of that. And they listed these things. Well, naturally, firearms manufacturers didn't want to go out of business. So they made weapons that were basically the same, except they complied. They took the legal definition that they were given, and they complied with it. And I'll tell you what, I got right here, back in the 90s, I won this rifle at a chili cook-off. This is a legal 1990s AK version that is Clinton assault weapon ban compliant. Okay? It can't hold more than 10 rounds because it uses single stack instead of a double stack magazine. It has a lug welded to the front here, so I can't put a flash hider on it. There's no forward pistol grip. That was one of the things that they said he could. Because, you might be too accurate with it. You might be able to hit your target. So anything that helps you do that is bad, probably. I don't know. No pistol grip on the back either. They put this Dragunov style stock on it, which I think looks kind of artsy, actually. And so it's Clinton compliant. And what did the gun ban people say? They said, they're skirting the law. They're finding ways to skirt the law, to shortchange it, to go around it. You know what they wanted? They didn't want these compliant with the law. They wanted them gone. That's what they wanted.
I have a quick question. Was there any other regulations that came around the time of the assault weapon ban? Was there other regulations that came with that, or was that the only legislation?
It was part of Clinton's crime bill. It had some good things in it. It put more police on the streets. It tightened down some of the restrictions for gun dealers, and some of them I agreed with. I'm a firm believer in keeping the paper trail, and I don't mind the background checks. Everybody says, "Oh, the NRA is against background checks." Well, they didn't always oppose the background checks, and I sometimes write a guest column every once in a while for a thing called ammoland.com. And when they first started talking about improving the background check, I wrote a column trying to sell the idea of improved background checks to the firearm faithful. And the whole idea is, now the NRA is right. We've got a background check right now. They say in its first year, it prevented something like 25,000 illegal sales or something like that. The problem with it is it didn't stop anyone. It didn't jail anyone. If you're a convicted felon and you walk into Bob's Bait and Tackle and you attempt to buy a firearm, that is a federal felony. That should get you 5 years in Club Fed just for doing that. If you somehow manage to buy it, and then they figure it out later and they come after you, that should still get you 5 years. And even though those 25,000, I think it was some astronomical number, and I'm happy that they were stopped, okay? But number one, only like a handful of people got arrested. And the rest of them, I don't think they stopped there. Do you?
No.
If you're a gangbanger or a drug dealer and you want, a gat, and you couldn't get it at the store, and you squeaked out of there without getting arrested, you think you're going to stop there? I don't for a minute. So I think the background checks have problems. I don't think, though, that dismantling is the idea. I don't go with the right along with that. I think the NICS system is good in and of itself. It just needs teeth. We need to arrest these people who are flagged as convicted felons because they have broken the law. We need to arrest the straw purchasers. But my main thing about the background checks is that they talk about the gun show loophole, and it doesn't exist. There is no gun show loophole. The gun show loophole refers to people who can go to a gun show, and heaven forbid if I sell a gun I legally own to another person who isn't a licensed dealer. And because the law is written the way it is, I'm legally barred from running a background check. Well, the gun banners want me to take my gun and bring my friend to a dealer at the gun show or outside the gun show and run the sale through them so they can run the check. But the problem with that is now you're imposing on the dealer. The dealer has every right to charge a fee, and it's not going to be a small fee. Even if it's $25 or $50, which is the low end. Usually it's more like $75. Suddenly that bargain, that gun you're selling to a buddy for $100 because that's all he can afford, suddenly isn't a bargain anymore. And what you've done is you've placed a de facto tax on my private sale. Now, to me, it made more sense, and this is what I wrote about in Ammo Land. It's called, the article is called Before We Were Against It. Talks about why the NRA opposes it, and that's one of the reasons. Now, if you could take the NICS background check system and beef it up so it could handle higher volume and put it online, just like a sex offender registry, you can go on the computer and find all the sex offenders in your neighborhood. Why can't I go online and find out if, Billy Bob so-and-so who wants to buy my gun that he found on Craigslist or the classifieds, why can't I find out if he's a felon or not?
Yeah,
now,
it doesn't even have to be specific to like identification. It could literally be, just a driver's license number or whatever. So if you're punching the system in, okay, you're looking at their driver's license, you punch in their driver's license number, at least that number's in the beefed up background check system.
You go.
That's one of the arguments that I've liked. Is I've always liked the larger, stronger background check. But I'm pretty sure we wanted to take a quick break here and let Tanner cool down. I can see steam coming out of his ears.
I don't think it's quite steam. I got headphones on. I'm like Stu. I got headphones on. You can't see the steam. But we will be back after this quick commercial break, because when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about gun control origins, amendments, and some statistics. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
This is Ishmael Brown, the HNIC from the Angry Black Rant podcast, and you're listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hi, my name's Callie.
And I'm Ari.
If you're like most of us, you're very concerned about the gay agenda's plans for world domination.
Are you tired of seeing glitter all over every damn thing?
Do you hate rainbows as much as any other red-blooded American?
Then we have the answer for all your baseless fears and unjustified paranoia.
Presented exclusively on Secular Media Network, the Gaytheist Manifesto is your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement.
You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, and at gaytheistmanifesto.secularmediagroup.com.
If you're not ready to get in line for your mandatory gay marriage and you're terrified of short-haired women in pantsuits, come have a listen and get up to date on their plans. You'll be glad you did.
Like what you're hearing? Check out more Cellar Door Skeptics every week right here on Spreaker and iTunes. Make sure you come back and check out new episodes with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. And always, remember, prepare for the revolution.
This is Trav Ramon, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
Now, back to the show.
And welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around with us. The first segment, we talked about SMART Recovery, a group that talks about statistics and facts for recovering alcoholics and narcotics addicts. And now we're talking with Stu. So we let Stu talk quite a bit for the first part of this interview discussion here. And we wanted to do that. We wanted to let him have this say, because in all fairness, he didn't get a fair say on our other episodes. So we thought, hey, let's let him talk, give his background, tell us about what he thinks. And then what we'll do is we'll start to direct where we go from here. So Hanna, where do you want to move the episode from here? What do you want to start with first?
Well, I mean, the statistics are basically where everybody likes to go with this, and that's the first place you told me to go run for. So, statistics and the things that I found, and I went to my particular go-to, the foundation that I basically trust, and I've never run into any situation where any PhDs or any scientific journals or anybody was saying, listen, this is not a trustworthy source. The Pew Foundation does an incredible job with staying relatively non-biased. They have some charts and some things that I've seen when it comes to the time bracket they choose drastically changes the information and the overall message. And that's a little bit of a nitpick that I have with the Pew Foundation. But either way, the initial data that I went to was just like, what are the biggest differences or the things that we're looking at when it comes to what society itself, the people of the country, and what I guess what our legislators are proposing. So the most recent thing that I had found on the Pew Foundation was 2013. So we haven't had a couple of the most recent mass shootings, but we've seen some of that stuff as far as 2013 is concerned. And the public and most of the legislative, they do agree that overall that background checks and stuff could be beefed up. That was just this consensus. It was at 73% and 81% favored background check, and 73% wanted background check bill that was currently going to pass. But when it comes to legislative action, we're looking at a lower number, especially from the Republican Tea Party, as low as 28% wanted the bill to pass. And what you're getting from that is that the people themselves are kind of okay with beefing up the system like we talked about. Maybe making like a driver's license number or something that we can use to make it just a little bit better. Take care of this.
I'm part of that 73%.
Yeah. And then so we're looking at, this is an area where we kind of agree. This is the middle ground that I play around in because I am a gun owner. I'm a hunter. I don't have handguns. I don't have a carry. I don't ever open carry, and I don't have a concealed carry permit. My brother-in-law I work with does. He carries every day, and I can
fix that for you.
What's that?
I can fix that for you.
Oh yeah, I bet you can. My uncle is a licensed national firearms dealer. He former police officer. I mean, the guns and those types of things are relatively normal. I just don't carry. I have a couple in my house, but they're mostly long rifles. So, the odds of them being used in any kind of situation is so low because of speed, load, and reactability, all that kind of stuff. So they're just hunting things that are kept in my house. But it seems like the people across the entire nation, because that's where we'll start, is the national numbers, is basically we agree. But the argument we hear is, it's a slippery slope. That as soon as we do anything, as soon as we change anything, it's a slippery slope to living in England and we're fighting each other with sticks.
That would never be my argument.
I know, and that's what we hear a lot. So what kind of argument would you put forth when we hear that argument on CNN and NBC and MSNBC?
Well, when I proposed that, actually I didn't propose that putting NICS online idea, by the way. I was one of the senators. But when that was proposed, it was shot down. The reason being is that the anti-gun rights forces, and they are relatively organized and they're vehement, they didn't want a free alternative to get background checks beefed up. They wanted that de facto tax. And the reason being is if they could price some people out, there would be less gun sales. And I think, although nobody except for people on the forums ever said such things, I think that was the logic behind it. Because whenever, I say you could get the NRA, you could get the GOA, for all I know, on board with just under the flag of due diligence. If you want to keep convicted felons and mental patients from accessing legal channels of firearms, they're still going to have illegal channels. It's just like we regulate drugs. There's still illegal channels. But for the apathetic and for the people who at least have some scruples, it will stop them. Okay, it'll make it harder. It'll make it a little bit more difficult. You have to do illegal things to get illegal drugs, and you would have to do illegal things to get these guns. So I file that under due diligence. I would have no problem with that. But they will not let go of that de facto tax. They want that running it through the FFL. It would be very similar to, say, if your dad wanted to sell you a car. Hey, say you had an old car and you're a college student, he wanted to sell it to you for $1. So you both have to go to the Ford dealer, and you got to pay the Ford dealer $100 to do the transaction. That's not right, and I don't think it's right for firearms either.
So you're saying that they should have to pay some sort of a fair equivalent, and they should have to be checked in some sort of a way. So let's say I'm mentally crazy. My dad's like, hey, I've got 17 handguns, and I just want to gift them to you at $1 a piece. You're saying that you would support background check on me to make sure I'm still able to inherit those weapons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's a sad fact, even though our civil rights, our basic civil rights are for all of us, some people abuse their rights.
This is why we can't have nice things.
That's right. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of libel or slander. It doesn't mean freedom to plagiarize. Okay. You can get in serious trouble for abusing your freedom of speech. Same thing with firearms. Guns are not for everyone. When I was a teenager and a young 20-something, I'd be the first to admit my temperament was a lot different back then. I was a bit of a hot dog, and I knew that if I had a gun in my car, it would be the speed pass to hell. I'd be in jail before I knew it. And I never considered carrying a firearm. There were a couple of times back in the day when there were strikes. I was a GM employee back in the day. And a few, shall we say, racially tense moments, which we all read about in the paper, that I had to be in a place that wasn't very comfortable. And at that time, I might have had something within reach. But on a daily basis, I knew it wasn't my kind of thing. Over the years, though, I've grown, like I hope we all do. I've gotten some experience and perspective, and I'm a much cooler soul these days. And I've taken on that responsibility, and it is a responsibility. I often joke that it's my second biggest responsibility, or that my marriage is my second biggest responsibility. Because
oh man,
because if I have marital troubles, nobody's going to die. That's the thing. And
so, would you support? And maybe this is wrong. Would you support stronger gun regulations for younger people then, based on what you're saying?
Well, when you say younger people, it's kind of vague. We don't have a firm bar as to what is an adult in this country. You can be charged as an adult at as early as 14 in some states for crimes. You can join. You can get married without consent at 17. You can sign a mortgage at 20. You can drink at 21. You can join the Army at 19 without parental consent. So there's no hard line. Right now, the law says you can't buy a handgun unless you're 21 years old. I think different people mature at different rates. And I don't think there is a hard line. That's why it's so blurry. I know some 22-year-olds that have way more common sense than some 35-year-olds I hang out with. So really what we're talking about is temperament. But when you're talking about basic civil rights, and, the Second Amendment is one of them, whether we like it or not, and we can parse what that actually meant. But back when Heller was decided, even President Obama came out and said, I've studied constitutional law. They came down on the right side of that. I applauded him because I knew it would get him no political capital, and he got none. But it was an honest statement. He knew what the amendment meant. And it's less about firearms. I say this in my book. It really isn't about guns. It's about your life your right to life, your right to defend your life, and your right to defend your other rights. Because really, without the ability to defend yourself, all those other rights are at the whim of whoever has the most force.
All right, so we'll start down that avenue. I think that's a good avenue to start down. So your point is that I should have the right to be able to defend my own life, and we could take Second Amendment, we could take any of these out of it for a second. And you're saying my base element is that I get to defend myself, and that nobody should be able to cut my life short unless I choose it or nature takes me. And I think everybody on the show knows you and I are both atheists, so we don't believe there is wills or acts of God. It is what it is. It's random bullshit that kills us, or we do something stupid and it kills us, or somebody kills us.
Or some stupid disease. Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So we both at least can agree on that. So, but what you're saying is that you should have the right to be able to defend your family, defend yourself, defend your property at all costs.
And that property, in Michigan, we don't get that. In some states like Texas, you can defend property. In Michigan, someone wants your wallet, you give them your damn wallet. However, a lot of times our property can make us vulnerable.
Yeah.
You pull up to that stoplight on a main drag in Detroit, and that carjacker wants your Tesla and throws a gun in your face. You don't have to wait around to see if he's willing to let you get out and peacefully walk away. Your life is in jeopardy at that moment.
Okay.
So
by you saying that is you feel that you have the ability to take that into your own hands, and you wouldn't trade that for anything else in the world. But what about this? What if the statistics say that you are less likely to be shot by a gun than you were to, I don't know, we'll just pick anything else. So you could pick die of cancer, let's say. And that's not an honest to God statistic. I'm just taking a random.
I think you're right. I think you do have a higher risk of cancer.
So if you have a less likely risk to die and you have a higher probability to harm somebody else or harm yourself based on a suicide thing, do you feel that we should take the minority view, the one that's going to affect less amounts of people and focus on that? Or why wouldn't we go after the larger thing and say, hey, you know what? If we can prevent these things from happening, why would we allow it to increase?
I agree with the spirit of what you're saying. I think the premise is wrong. You're making several assumptions. You're thinking that, like, I'm more now at risk of suicide. I'm not. If I thought I had a suicidal bone in my body, there wouldn't be any guns in this house. If I thought my wife had a suicidal bone in her body, there would never be an unsecured firearm in this house. If I had children around, there would never be an unsecured firearm in this house. The fact of the matter is that I was looking into statistics when I was researching my book, and I was quite surprised to find that you are less likely to die in a structural home fire, a house fire, than you are to be killed by a home invader or an assailant. And I thought that was rather interesting. Yet when you install smoke detectors and you put that fire extinguisher in your kitchen and you buy that policy against that, and if you have a second story, you get that escape ladder and you do fire drills with your family, and everybody says, wow, they've taken precautions, they're really smart, they're wise people. But then if I take a precaution of preparing for an armed home invasion, suddenly I'm paranoid. But the statistics tell me that's more likely.
Okay, so I'm going to say that I don't agree with that analogy in the retrospect that I wouldn't call you crazy for owning a gun at your house. Therefore, I also wouldn't also say that somebody's awesome for taking those precautions based on a fire, right? But I think there's two different
I don't think
equivalents.
You would say that. I'm just saying this is what I hear from people.
So fair enough, right? So the majority of the public is what your feel is. But to me, there's two different types of harm causes that can happen from those. Mm-hmm. If you didn't take make your fire escape, right?
Mm-hmm.
There would be a death of, let's say, 7 to 10 people topped. If you didn't take and bring the firearm into your house, then you would only be preventing one life. So logically, you would want to do the one versus the other, because if you had the firearm, you could kill the home invader, right? But the problem becomes...
Actually, my goal isn't to kill the home invader. If I can rack the pump of my shotgun and scare them away with that noise, then the job is done. If I hit them, but they don't die, I'm more than happy, because that's not my goal. My goal is not to kill. My goal is to stop them from harming me or my family. I have my students eliminate the word kill from their vocabulary. That is not our goal. And if you want to get back into statistics, more than 80% of those who have been shot survive the experience.
Okay. And that's fine. We can get back into that in a minute. But when we look at the logic behind it, right, there is more variability to what you can do with a gun than there is what you can do to a ladder. So that's why I'm telling you I don't think that's in a fair equivalent. So you're right.
There's a definite seriousness factor when it comes to firearms. They are weapons. They are potentially lethal weapons. That's why they're so often compared to cars, because cars, while they're not weapons, end up killing people at a hellish rate anyway, and that's because they're pervasive in life. They're everywhere, and even people who don't use them, if you're out walking around, you still got to worry about cars. And if you ask some people, they feel the same way about guns. And the way the media shows every bad thing that ever happens with guns and never reports any of the good stuff, which happens at anywhere between an 18-to-1 to 80-to-1 ratio, depending on the given year and location, they never report the good stuff. So I have no problem with people who are afraid. I would be afraid if all I listened to was the mainstream media.
And that's why we do this show, because our goal is to go against the mainstream media. We're not a mainstream media show, if you want to call it that. And so let's look at well, we swear.
I wouldn't
we're
be
atheists,
here if you were.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd be here if you were.
All right. Well, good. So if you look at some of the different statistics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we want to go back to statistics a little bit. I don't want to spend the whole show on that, because at some point we need to get into the moral argument, moral discussion of this, because I think you and I will agree on a few things and probably disagree based on different moral traits on where we're going to go with this. But if we look at the statistics, right, if we look at where they are, and we were to date back, you can see the populace has increased. For instance, we went from 175 million to 325 million in about 75 years. That's a lot. That's a huge jump. It's almost double.
One of my concerns, actually.
And you're right. And so the difference is, though, we don't have gun statistics that date back to the 50s. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have the same record keeping on gun statistics. And we could speculate and assume all day long. You and I could why they didn't. But we don't have the facts, so we should just dismiss that portion of it, because I can't justify that. But they do have some statistics. For instance, in the 80s, there was a certain percentage of homicides by handguns. It increased into the 90s. Same with other guns, which they talk about it being, and this is from the FBI website, they talk about it being basically like assault weapons, shotguns, hunting rifles. Those all fit into that. And you can see where the percentage increases in the 90s, between 90 and 95, and then drastically drops off. And it does not actually start to increase again into 2003, beginning of 2004. And then all of a sudden you start to see a spike. But it never goes back to that 90s level. But if you go back to the 80s, let's just say the 80s were 10,000 per capita, right? And then in the 90s, it jumped up to 14,000. Then all of a sudden by 2003, it dives all the way down to 8,000. Then it kind of spikes. It goes kind of variable. If we look at that and we look at what those numbers represent, there's something that happened in the 90s that dropped that. Even though those are our handgun statistics, something dropped that. So my question is the only big thing I can find in the 90s was Bill Clinton's act, the discussion that we had a little bit at the beginning. He had an assault rifle ban. He put more police on the streets. They put more regulations in, and we do see homicides drop by 35%. That's an amazing statistic. All through regulations.
Yeah, I do cover that in my book, and people are quick to say that was due to regulations. I don't, because you will notice in those statistics that the murder rate actually started lowering prior to the enactment of the ban. And it continued, if you drew an imaginary line, it continued at roughly the same rate for the length of the ban that it was doing before it was. And then when the ban was lifted, when it sunset, it still continued to drop until some big, I forget what it was, some big event made it spike, like you were saying. And it stayed, as the murder rate dropped, the number of guns in circulation rose. It was an estimated 170 million back in the mid-90s. And today it's somewhere around 330 million. There are actually more guns now in circulation than there are human beings. And so the premise that guns cause crime, to me, is shattered by that statistic alone. And there was other things going on during the Clinton gun ban. You remember what the economy was like.
Hold on. So first off, I don't have the 300 million. The statistics I got do not say that. And I got them actually from the AATF website. They don't say there's 300 million guns in circulation. I have 1.4 million basically is what was applied to for registration. Now that doesn't mean that there's
new.
more illegal
Those
ones.
are new guns. Those are new guns.
No,
I've seen no estimate that puts it under 300 million. And they are estimates because
they're applications captured in the firearm registry for
Right.
renewals and new guns.
Right.
That's what this says. So that's renewals and new guns.
Well, renewals, who renews anything? I don't need any registration to continue to own the firearms I own.
I find that may be a problem personally, but again,
Well, why? What would that do?
we're moving the goalpost away from that. We're moving the
Right.
goalpost because you got to register to have your car, and you got to take tests, and you got to do these things to maintain your car, and that's a more lethal weapon, technically speaking, statistically, than gun deaths are. I mean, I'll admit that you could get killed. You have a higher probability of getting killed by a car or in an accident than you do by a gun. I'll admit that probability.
So that could be part of the background check boosting. It'd be another way that we can.
I just want to know how it's supposed to prevent any crime, though. I want to know how you're going to get the gangs and the drug dealers who are committing most of these street crimes to register anything. And we register drivers, we register automobiles, and that doesn't stop accidents. It doesn't stop drunk driving. All it does is give us ways to punish people after the act. I'm all about prevention. To me, and this is something you brought up, you said, let's focus on the biggest chunk. Well, if you look at that statistic, the one that everyone likes to trot out, that upwards of 30,000 people every year in our country are killed by gunfire. What isn't often said, it seems like, people hear that statistic and they think, wow, murder is rampant. Well, no, those aren't murders. More than 60% of that total are suicides. And I have had no less than 3 people in my circle of friends and family who have been touched by suicide. And so I'm a big supporter of access to mental health care, crisis centers. I support the Society Prevention, the ASP, and to me, that's the biggest chunk. If you could eliminate suicide, that would be the largest chunk. Then you move down the ladder, and you get to the gang violence, the street crime, and those people would never be, any demands to have mandatory training, to have mandatory registration, to have background checks. Those people are never, ever going to be part of that. Again, the more apathetic, the more unimaginative or creative, in other words, stupid ones, might be deterred.
Well, that's what I kind of assumed. Like, we're looking at that number of people, those people, the ones who are never going to conform to the system, conform to the rules. That's an issue. And this is usually a statistic that's actually pro-gun for a lot of people. It's the majority of crime, like homicide rate, violent crimes are going down. They've consistently gone down for a significant period of time. And so it's like, hey, this is, a good sign. And we have this issue of cognitive dissonance where we're looking at the majority of Americans, 63% said in a Gallup survey that last year crime was on the rise. Despite crime statistics showing that it's a 20-year low. So basically what we're looking at is that people think things are getting worse, people think they're getting dangerous, and they're saying, you know what, I really don't want any gun control because I want to be able to purchase and protect myself from that dangerous element. But we're looking at,
or they'll say, we want more gun control because it's crazy. It can go either way. It just depends on your worldview, right? Yeah. That same thing can provoke either response.
Yeah, and I actually do agree with that because it's like, okay, well, but that's the other thing is, for me personally, I've never been in any situation where guns were a situation that was applicable. And I actually lived in the Detroit area, in the Farmington Hills, Livonia, Redford area when I was younger. I was born in Oak Park, the Detroit area. I didn't live in the best areas when I was younger, and I moved over to the west side of the state, and it got infinitely better. But
I went to McFarland Elementary School.
Oh,
I lived
yeah.
on Cheyenne Street in Detroit. Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, we both kind of started in the same area, and we spread out further away from that. But what we're seeing is a lowering number of these types of situations. So, what we have is, more gun right supporters because we have a social reception that there's more danger. And so what we need is, a little bit more accuracy when it comes to, hey, listen, you're not going to be carjacked as likely as the TV tells you. You're not going to be chased down and murdered in the streets, just like all of the 24/7 nonstop media. This is a little bit it's kind of people saying, okay, everything's terrible, everything's horrible, the Donald Trump campaign. And
right.
It's not as terrible, it's not as horrible. Like, you can use your guns and you can buy your guns in for fun and support, and these are things that I like and enjoy.
Exactly.
But, they were talking about larger numbers of people, significantly larger number of people, purchasing guns for self-defense because they're afraid, because they think they need to protect themselves. And this is kind of like a misinformation thing that I don't like.
I tell my students that statistically, even police will go through their whole career and they'll never have to unholster their firearm except when they're on the range. And that's the way we want it. I mean, I don't know about you, but I want to live my whole life. I want to get old, and I never along the way want anyone to try to kill me. It's bad enough we got to dodge other crazy drivers. We got to avoid diseases. We got to, maintain our health and try to take care of our bodies. We got to deal with criminals now or killers. I hope no one ever tries to kill me. And, even statistically, all the dozens upon dozens of students now that I've trained, chances are that, only maybe one or two will ever need to defend themselves with a firearm. And again, that's the way we want it. But getting back to our show and one of the things we agree on, we're atheists. I believe this life is all we get. And that we don't go to a better place, that when you're dead, it's all over. And to me, that puts a premium on every day and every second that I have. And I don't want it cut short by anything. And with the stakes being that high, this is not the preamble to the eternity that I'm going to spend in bliss. This is it. The however many, 60, 70 years I get, that's it. And I want them all.
All right. So we talk about protecting your life, right? And even you're saying, hey, even if it's only a 1% chance I'll ever have to use it, I should have the right to protect my life, correct?
I would say yes.
Okay. And that's fair, because I think a lot of people feel that, right? I'll be honest, in true retro, I sleep with a baseball bat by my door.
There you go.
I'm not telling you it's any different. The difference is my weapon is different than your weapon. But in reality, I do sleep with a weapon by my bed for the specific reason, the same thing you're saying, because my life is worth this life. And even if my life comes to nothing, right, and I don't contribute to humanity or move humanity forward, as Esther would say, I'm still required to personally enjoy what I have here, and I do enjoy it. I don't want to die. If I did, I wouldn't be here. I want to be here. I want to live my life.
And the beautiful thing about both of our weapons is they have recreational value.
All right.
Enjoy a good game of ball, and I enjoy a day out at the range. I spent my birthday out at Pontiac Lake. It was a great time. We had a literal blast.
No. But you can't.
Several of them, in fact.
Well, there you go. But if we look at the point here, right, if you have a 1% chance of dying and you could lower it to a 1/10%, would you want to do that?
It depends on the risk reward. Again, there are certain risks I'd be unwilling to take just to account for that little 1% chance. For instance, I mentioned
let's make
earlier,
it bigger than because it's actually bigger
home,
than that. Let's make it bigger than that because it's actually bigger than that. Let's say 60%. If you had a 60% better chance, would you take the 60% better chance if it provided more restrictions?
Well, again, it depends on the cost to reward. Depends on the cost to reward ratio.
Okay, so how do you define that then? How do you define your cost to reward ratio?
Well,
and how can you standardize that? Because your cost to reward ratio is going to be different than mine.
One of the most common is, and I know his name gets drugged through the mud a lot because both sides hate him, both sides love him, but there was an economist, John R. Lott, who looked at the whole issue in economic terms. Now, I'm not going to use his statistics, but when you start looking at the whole firearms controversy in economic terms, then the bottom line is lives saved versus lives lost. And the best statistics we have show that 30,000 people dying by gunfire, 60 some percent of which are suicides, versus a reported, and here's where it gets murky because, again, the reporting statistics are different. Some departments don't even report the same way. But in all the statistics I've been able to find, the number runs anywhere from 700,000 to 2.5 million times every year someone uses a firearm to stop some sort of assault. I don't know if you could compare that to lives saved, but it's some kind of violent attack, either a rape or an attempted murder, some kind of violent assault. To me, that's a fairly stiff statistic. That completely dwarfs, even if we go with the lowest of the scale. I tend to go in the middle because, again, during the Clinton assault weapon ban period, his own Justice Department was tasked with tracking the success or failure of said ban. And they reported at the end of the ban that, first of all, it made no discernible impact. And secondly, that as many as 1.5 million people defended themselves with a firearm. So when you take that statistic and you combine it, and you put it against the 33,000 people who were killed, and if you want to toss in even the 170-some thousand who were injured, it still completely dwarfs it. There is still a significant benefit to cost ratio from us having responsible gun ownership in this country.
All right, so we're going to stop real quick right there because I think the gap's a little bit bigger. So, for instance, in terms of if we look at worldwide firearm homicide rates, so that's murder rates, not suicide rates.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at per 100,000 capita populace, right? So we're going to quantify it. We'll lower the number. It's easier to deal with. The U.S. has the highest rate by 100% technically over the lowest nation. So if we eliminate the anomalies, probably based on a populace, right? So we're going to eliminate the anomalies. We're 94% worse than the second lowest nation.
That's a kind of this is one of those things about statistics that drive people crazy. What we're talking about here is murder. Okay, we're talking about murder. What the tricksters like to do is throw the word gun in front of it. Well, when you do that, of course, the United States has more guns. So naturally, when people are intent on murder, they're going to choose a gun. In Japan, if you're intent on murder, you don't have a gun available. You choose something else. And I bring up Japan because of the suicide angle. They significantly outpace us suicide-wise. However, there's almost no guns there. And people like to blame our suicide rate on guns. So really, what I like to look at is the per capita murder rates. Now, the UNODC compared 192 countries as to per capita murder rate, just murder, by any method. We came in at 102. We're not even in the top 100 as far as our overall murder rate. So my question is this: does it matter how someone gets murdered?
All right, so those numbers are different. According to the American Journal of Medicine, we have 1.7, and we'll just pick Australia. They're 0.9 because Australia is the big one people use, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So non-firearm homicide rate, we are 46% more likely to be murdered with a non-firearm in the United States than in Australia.
Right, and what does that tell you? It tells you a couple of things.
Well, it tells me that if we look at
a violence problem, don't we?
Yes.
And I also want to say that Australia's population, the entire kit and caboodle of the entire continent of Australia, is less than that of Texas alone.
But
so you're dealing with different populous centers, different concentrations, whole different economics.
Okay, so how about this? Do you have statistics that back up and demonstrate that the homicide rate will even out the more people you have? Why would that change? Just because you have a different populous size? I don't see the correlation here. I think you're misleading the correlation with this.
Well, no, because if you look at where most murders happen, most murders don't take place in the sticks. Okay, they're in the population centers. They're where people are concentrated. When Canada, which doesn't have near as much murder as we do, especially with firearms, but when they do, where are they? They're in Toronto. They're in Winnipeg. They're where all the people are jammed up together. It's social pressures. This is a well-understood phenomenon among sociologists and behaviorists. You look at where the violent crime is out west. You know, California, they have the strictest gun laws in the nation, yet they have quite a high homicide rate if you look in places like Compton and L.A. And what's going on there? That's where the population density is high. It's where the drug trafficking is high. And you notice the two go together. People like to talk about the red state, blue state stuff. What it is concentrations. You have Louisiana. Where are they? They're a port state. They're a border state. They're a traffic hub for drugs and pretty much everything else. Plus, they're a big city. There's lots of gang activity there. So it's not a red state, blue state thing. It's where they are and what kind of population concentration you have. You know, Detroit, we're pretty much a blue state, but Detroit has the highest homicide rate in the country. We talk about Chicago a lot, but if you look at the numbers, per capita, Detroit wins. It was only last year, I think, that they took a dip down, and that's when Police Chief Craig encouraged citizens to arm up, get trained, and it had a ripple effect. The criminals said, what? They started seeing the stories of armed self-defense, and they said, oh, it ain't safe here anymore. And home invasions dropped. And, it wasn't enough to take us off the top 10, but it got us, it helped us lose the number one slot for about 5 minutes.
So, all right. So I hate to cut you off, but we do have to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll have more with Stu talking about gun control, because that's the topic of the day, right, folks? So, all right, we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics. And when we come back, I'm going to let Hanna lead this one because I think I've overtalked Hanna on this episode a little bit much. So we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hey guys, this is Wyatt Mathers from the Atheist Avengers podcast. You are listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
Hi, this is Dan, Brian, and Matt with the Godless Revolution podcast. We've had a lot of great guests on this show, such as Russell Glasser, Dan Arrow, Brian Fields, David Silverman, Doug Mesner, a.k.a. Lucian Greaves, and Joey Kirkman, whom we love a lot. We've also had a lot of really cool local guests. And we're a podcast that likes to fight for the separation of church and state and against anti-skepticism of all kinds. You should give us a listen, because if you don't, you're going to be really sad. Make your ears happy. Listen to the Godless Revolution podcast.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
This is Deborah McTaggart from Beyond the Trailer Park, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Okay, so we ended that last little bit. We kind of bounced back from the global, the worldwide, and we went back to the U.S. We bounced around with Chicago and Detroit and, concentration centers, and we're looking at basically statistics. We're looking at numbers, how many people, guns, and my nasty, dirty, moderate opinion here who kind of likes them and kind of doesn't like them for a variety of reasons. And when I look at these types of things, like we completely agree on beefing up the background checks. We think this is a good thing. I mean, making, like what you said, like an easily accessible, useful thing. And so I think that's an awesome idea. And I really think rationally, like if you take away Citizens United, take away money, take away all that stuff, and you let a conservative speak his mind and not be tied up in the money in the government, I really think you're going to see a little bit more these majority United States numbers. I think we're going to start seeing that. So if we ever do manage to get money out of government, I think we'll have a little bit more rationalism here. But so taking what we have, making adjustments to what we have, and tying it into the global thing that we were talking about a little bit a minute ago, it's just comparing the United States, New Zealand, and Australia, and all that kind of stuff. Well, when you compare, we're basically the size of all of them, well, half of almost all of them. Like what we're looking at is we are representing a massive number, a huge number compared to what the rest of the world is looking at. 7 times more likely Americans are likely to die from violence, and 6 times more likely to be accidentally killed with a gun. So the question, like just starting from this section here, is just the rest of the world obviously is doing something different, and they may have higher homicide rates, but the gun rate obviously is low. So we need to figure out what's the difference here as far as what countries are doing a higher homicide. So like these northern Scandinavian countries, I have a hard time believing that their murder rates are really high, but it's just the fact that they don't have guns that is low. So what can we kind of appropriate so that what the other countries are doing that could help us find a better place?
I don't. First of all, I think that we're blaming guns for a lot. Like I say, out of the 192 countries the UNODC surveyed, we don't make the top 100 when it comes to murder. We have many other countries that have no guns, like Japan or almost gun-free France, that surpass our suicide rates. And they're just the 2 examples I like to pull out because they're gun control meccas. And we have places that are way worse. We're not even the number 1 gun homicide capital of the world. We're told that a lot, but we're not. Mexico far surpasses us. A lot of South American countries surpass us. I forget how many of them there are, but I don't think we're in the top 10 as far as gun homicides either. Gun ownership, we are solid number 1. It's solid, but nobody even comes close. But we can say that about a lot of things. More Americans own boats than anybody else. We just happen to have more money. It's our economy. And you're talking about population. I talked about Australia fitting into Texas. Well, Canada could fit into California. The entire lock, stock, and barrel of all the people that live there. So we're dealing with bigger monsters, and so because we're a bigger population, we're going to have bigger problems. And I'll tell you, our socioeconomic problems, our lack of attention to education, our silly war on drugs, which is deadly and should be abolished, all of that is making for a toxic brew, which is leading to violence. And I don't think guns have anything to do with it. I think guns halt as much violence as they create, maybe even more. But you know what? We're never going to get rid of gun violence until we get rid of violence overall.
You could get rid of gun violence by eliminating guns. I mean, technically speaking, you would eliminate gun violence because you wouldn't have it.
Well, I'd like to see how that would be accomplished.
I'm not saying it can be. I'm just saying. I'm just taking your absolute statement and picking on it. That's all. You created an absolute statement, and I'm saying no. That's not a true.
The
absolute
whole idea
statement.
is we don't want to revert to Game of Thrones. Okay, so if it's not gun violence, it would be sword or knife violence. Back before,
but the statistics show different, though. The statistics show different. Well, according to the ones I have, it does. According to the ones
by the way, I love the FBI Uniform Crime Reports. It's one of my favorite things to cite, as well as the Bureau of Justice Statistics, because I've never found bias in those two sources. I mean, they're government. People don't trust it, especially my right-wing friends. But I've never found any intentional bias in those things. I also don't detract from any source. I don't say, hey, consider the source. I'm not going to listen to anything that, you brought up Pew. I use Pew a lot, even though some people say they're biased. I'll use anyone's statistics, and the only reason is because you can vet them. We have the internet now. It's easy to fact check. One of my favorite sources, and a lot of people say, oh, it's biased, it's terrible. Well, it's a place called Guncite, GUNCITE.com. And it's full of articles. It talks about various things like how often are guns used in self-defense, liberalized concealed carry laws. Is a gun an effective means of self-defense? Does gun ownership deter burglaries? All these questions. And all the articles, interestingly enough, have footnotes. And so if you take issue with one of those, you can go look up the sources. And I have corrected them a couple of times, and the people at Guncite changed it like that. So I have no qualms with the integrity of the people there. Huffington Post never changed anything that I caught them on. They're more fun.
The Huffington Post, the Blaze,
more fun to read. Yeah.
No, we're looking at.
I don't.
We're looking at a change when it comes to like the reporting and the people that we trust. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned Pew Foundation. And there are people who have basically problems with the people who have worked at Pew and left Pew and a variety of other things. But I pretty much have to go. I do trust the FBI statistics, like you said. I trust the Pew Foundation and the CDC and a variety of other things for statistics, trying to get more information, and it's useful. And so, I mean, we have these studies here that are essentially saying, like the worldwide stuff that I was mentioning before, that even though the U.S. has half the population of the 22 nations in this list that we have combined, and we'll put a source in there from this article so you can see this chart that I'm referring to, but it says that the United States accounted for 82% of all those gun deaths. And so we're looking at, per capita basis, the U.S. has much more gun death. And we can look into, overall complete and total death. But I'm just trying to reduce the gun deaths and stuff right here. I can't.
Well, I'm trying to reduce death overall.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing.
Opposite end of the coin, is that one of the ways to prevent death is by the use of force. And that's the part you can't casually dismiss. If the Clinton Justice
it only
Department
accounts for a small percentage, then you're not really reducing. Well,
apparently, according to the Clinton Justice Department of the 90s and some more recent surveys, that 700,000 to 1.5 million or 2.5 million defensive uses you cannot casually dismiss those.
Yeah, and that's what I've been trying not to casually dismiss. And so I've been looking for that link. And if we find it, we'll put it in here so people can see it as well. But in the end, like what we're looking at is basically a difference when it comes to a global statistic when it comes to this. So my perspective is to try to reduce these things in the United States, because obviously the United States doesn't play by the rules when it comes to the World Health Organization's findings, when it comes to the World Court's findings, or the UN resolutions. We don't really follow anybody else's rules.
We don't care about global warming.
No, we don't care about putting 11-year-olds in prison and 14-year-olds to death, like we mentioned a little while
we put
ago.
more people, the land of the free, home of the brave, except if you're, if you're unpopular and you wind up in prison.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we have a lot of cronyism in politics. We have a lot of this stuff that we don't like. And so my perspective as kind of a casual gun user, casual gun person, I don't really hate them. I don't share Chris's intense dislike for open carry. Actually, I saw a guy open carry walking down the street while I was driving down the road right downtown Grand Rapids, dropping off some steel for heat treat today. And I hope he was going in to take care of some good business, but that's one of the things is nowadays we don't know. We don't know if that open carry is about to
I'll tell you what,
something
true
bad.
confession time. I'm a concealed carry instructor, and I'm a big fan of concealed carry simply because if you don't need your gun, then out of sight is out of mind, and there's no reason for anyone to be aware of it or worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
However, the last few days, in our Michigan summer, it has been in the 90s, in the mid-90s, high 90s. And true confession time, I have open carried because that vest I always walk around in was too damned hot.
I remember that from the convention you were wearing it, but you didn't have anything in your pockets.
I have what I call my man purse, and it's right here on the back of my chair. I always got my vest with me as kind of a photographer's vest. I got used to wearing one when I was traveling. I went to Mexico and to Canada and a few other places to do my seminars on DJ work, and I got used to having everything with me, so I didn't forget anything. It's the same feeling, I guess, that women have when they grab their purse. And literally, over the summer, I now have an actual man purse. Of course, it's called the Max Position Tactical Pack because it's a manly man thing. But seriously, guys, it's just a purse. It's a bag, okay? And anyway, the one thing I don't believe in, though, is off-body carry. I do not believe that people, if they're carrying concealed, should carry anything off of their body. So the firearm compartment of this bag is empty because if someone stole my bag from me, then guess who put another gun on the street? And that's not going to be me. If I ever put on a gun on the street, it's because they took it off of my unconscious body. All right. So anyway, true confession. Yes, I've been bad and open carried. And what was kind of refreshing to me is that most people do not bat an eye. I've actually gotten compliments from people. Last year, about a year ago, I was at a rally with our good friend Norm to protest circumcision. And this guy came out, he pulled up in the parking lot behind the protesters, and the guy came out yelling. And I immediately had my hand on the butt of my gun. And I can count on one hand, by the way, in all the years I've carried, that's happened less than these fingers. That day got two of them, because not only did he come at us yelling, but when I saw he was unarmed, I relaxed a little bit and I figured, well, they'll just yell at each other. He went back to his car, reached in and grabbed something. And once again, I was ready. I for sure thought he was going to swing around, but I waited, and he brought out some kind of magazine or something. And when that confrontation was over, I told the lady who was standing next to me, and she had a stroller with her two kids. I said, "Man, that had my adrenaline going. That was the first time all year and in several years that I've actually had my hand on the butt of my gun." She goes, "You're armed? Oh, I feel so much better." True story.
All right. So we're going to move the direction a little bit here. So,
Sorry, I didn't mean to take up so much time with that.
We've already hit almost 2 hours, and we only get 3 hours to record anyway to be able to post. But what I want to do is I want to move the direction a little bit and talk about a couple different things. So one of the big things that I think we define the difference between you and I personally in terms of the statistics side of things, that there's certain things you're willing to gamble on a lower percentage that I am not, and vice versa. For instance,
I wouldn't call it gambling. I'd say I'm convinced. I have
Well,
statistics that I'm convinced about, and apparently you do too. And I don't see myself as a gambling sort.
Well,
I've been to Vegas 3 times, and I've spent less than $20 gambling. So.
But the difference is there is some sort of a gamble there. I mean, there is some sort of a gamble because that's what statistics are. Statistics are probability. Probability is gambling. So you can look at how you want to look at it. But there you are gambling on a certain thing. Your position is that, hey, even if it's only a 1% chance or less that I'm going to get killed by a gun, the probability that others are going to get killed, my life is worth more than the other gun deaths. And you don't see the correlation there. Whereas I would.
Well, I don't see my being prepared for the worst as correlating with increased gun deaths.
You don't, and I do. But
how,
like I said,
though? Because none of my guns have ever killed anyone.
None of yours have, but others have. Yours have not, but others have. So
I would raise it further and say that I'm typical. The ones that you hear about, the miscreants, the people who have the problems, I would be willing to bet, if you want to go on the gambling idea, I would like to know how many of those are actually legal gun owners. How many of those are not involved in drugs in some way? How many of those? How many actually are NRA members? You would hear it if some giant if there was some big mega shooting spree that happened by an NRA guy. I think you would hear it.
You're right. You would, but again, now we're talking about biases. We're talking about specific categories. Like, I'm not calling out NRA people or gun ownership people or illegal gun ownership people. I'm not calling any of those people out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaving it at a broad basis because I'm looking at the raw statistics. And raw statistic wise, there's a higher probability of being murdered in the United States than there is in other nations.
Not being murdered. Like I say, we're not even in top 100.
Total homicide rate
you're talking
is
being
homicide rate. Total homicide rate, according to versus Australia, with 100% or 100,000 people per capita, is literally more than 4 times more in the United States.
The closest
than it
that
is
we
in there.
see is the Republic of Korea at 1.3 total homicide rate.
Yeah. Non-firearm homicide rates, non-firearm between Australia and the United States is double. And this is per capita. So this isn't like saying, hey, we've only got 10 people, you've only got 10. So they're relating the two. They're merging the two
average
statistics.
throughout the population.
Yes.
Right.
So unless you can specifically correlate the fact that if you have a larger populace, that there's a higher probability there will be gun rates than a smaller populace, the argument to me is clear.
That's one variable. That's just one variable.
But the variable has to be correlated.
They
you would
want
have
to talk
demonstrate
about advanced countries.
You would have.
They always throw in that advanced country thing, right?
But
like
I'm not though.
economics.
I don't care what other people are. We're talking just you and me right here. I haven't used that argument. You and I have not gone down that road yet. I haven't got into first world or third world population differences because I actually agree with you a little bit in that.
Economic pressures can change the overall homicide picture, don't you think?
Yes, they can, but only to an extent. And I don't think the economic pressures inside the United States are worse than in Australia, let's say. And if you do, you'd have to come up with some sort of a statistic correlation that you could use to justify throughout all countries. You'd have to be able to take the addition, let's say, of all these different properties to come up with a value. So if that happens, then I can concede and have that conversation. But they don't have that statistic. They don't have that variability. It's all just raw numbers. So if you look at the raw numbers, that's what the raw numbers say.
Raw numbers, though, are easy to interpret in many different ways.
You're right. You can interpret anything, but it doesn't mean your interpretation is correct. It just means you're using bullshit. We talk about creationists for evolutionists.
Right.
They take the same facts we take for evolution and twist them. And I'm telling you, if you took raw numbers, you have a 46% chance higher of being murdered in the United States by a non-firearm than you do in Australia.
Right.
The only country that exceeds it is the Czech Republic. And then I think if you want to talk about the variation between first world, second world, third world countries, we can then get into that, right? We can then talk that. I don't consider Australia a third world country or even a second world country. I don't consider Germany that. I don't consider Canada that.
And really, I don't think that the people who live in those places care. Like in
that feels like you're moving the goalposts. That's just what it feels like. You're moving the goalposts.
I'm trying to tell you that economically, those differences result in some dichotomies, shall we say. In Central America, for instance, San Pedro Sula, where it's illegal to own a firearm. They have a higher firearm homicide rate there, and you have more gun ownership there by law-abiding people because they're scared to death because they have to be. And yet the penalties for being caught with a gun there, or even ammunition there, are very strict, very draconian. So why does that happen? Why that pressure? It's a much more violent place.
So fair enough, right? So if that's true, and I don't see that statistic because I don't have that. So you provide it, I'll read it, look at it, and then we can discuss whether it's a valid statistic. But does that happen on a nationwide scale, or is that a isolated incident, right? Is that a specialized incident to that case? How often does it happen? If you took 100 countries, would 100 countries repeat the same effect?
I think that human nature, basic human nature, is fairly universal. Okay? Humans are humans. You put a human from anywhere in the same conditions, and they will react similarly.
I would disagree with that.
Okay. Well, I mean, at least from what I understand on human behavior, and I admit I have no training in that. I'm just an armchair science geek. I think human nature is a fairly constant thing. And if you look at the statistics as far as overall homicide, overall suicide, overall assault, overall robbery, all the various things, rape, all of the bad things, you'll notice that while some places are a little more tranquil than others, generally there's a background. There's a fairly uniform background. All those things happen, and they always will as long as you have concentrations of humans. We're kind of trying to make sense of different locales with so many different factors governing them. You could just as easily, like we were talking about the Clinton assault weapon ban, we want to talk statistics. Let's first of all consider that assault weapons were used in less than 4% of all firearms crimes. As a matter of fact, all long guns, shotguns, rifles, were used in less than 4% of all homicides and firearms crimes. 96% are handguns. And the so-called assault weapons are a subset of that 4%. Just a small subset of that 4%. Okay?
Yeah, but there's a reason for that. And I guess I'm going to interrupt because there's a reason for that. There's a difference in what's this defined as an assault weapon versus an assault rifle. There is this huge
there
definition difference.
Oh, there
differences. And that's okay. If there's probably one thing you and I agree on, the media uses that, and people don't understand what the difference between those are. A lot of people don't get it. I don't want to just ban assault rifles, right? I want to look at assault weapons and understand how they impact life. But if we just ban assault rifles, the majority of what exists today would be legal because they don't fall within that assault rifle category.
Right. Well, when anyone who's served in the military may have experienced an assault rifle. An assault rifle has a happy switch on it, which turns it into a fully automatic machine gun.
Yeah.
Whereas the so-called assault weapon is just a semi-automatic rifle that looks similar to the full auto or switchable versions. That's the only
I would disagree.
connection.
I disagree.
They
also
on
talk
what
about
basis?
because they talk about a detachable magazine. They talk about different telescopes. They talk about overall length of the firearm.
Never heard of a scope being associated with an assault weapon. If you look at the federal guidelines, they have things like folding stocks and flash hiders and grenade launchers. And that's a funny thing because when was the last time you heard about someone being killed in a grenade attack? The grenade launchers, if
there was
they
a guy in
exist at all-
Detroit that was just arrested just recently. He's an Arabic man who had been amassing grenades. I don't know. That was
Right, we're
it was
gonna get
actually a
into
surprising success that wasn't really responded to a whole lot in the media. But I actually heard about a grenade guy that was caught.
But the whole grenade, besides that statistical flyer, the whole grenade launcher thing, people who have those are collectors. They're war collectors. They're curio and relics guys who like to have a cool looking gun in their cabinet. They don't own grenades. You can't own a grenade. So sometimes they have shells, empty shells that they put in there just for display.
Well, this guy was basically, he was caught by the ATF or the NSA or whoever was actually in charge of the sting. He had amassed and purchased ammunition and actual grenade launchers.
Well, and that's what
He'd been
terrorists
using,
do.
I mean,
those
all kinds of
terrorists
black
in France.
channels and stuff. But he was caught because he was trying to purchase more on eBay of all stupidity.
Right.
But
it's a good thing these guys aren't bright.
The only way
right?
you would do something that dumb is that if it succeeded in the past, right? Like, is this guy continuing this ridiculous behavior? Well,
it worked in
fail.
France. It worked in France. In France, they banned regular firearms, let alone assault weapons, and they had actual military style assault rifles. In other words, full auto.
You're right, but there's more people killed in America by mass shootings than there is in France. Period.
Well, there is. Shootings overall have actually been on the decline. What hasn't been on the decline...
Not mass shootings, though. You're right, shootings have.
The
mass shootings have not.
Haven't been, and they've increased for two reasons. First of all, talk about moving goalposts. The definition has changed. When I was growing up, a mass shooting meant that a handful of people... like in the Texas tower shooting, clock tower, 1966. Over what was it, 30 people or more were shot. And to me, that was a mass shooting. And then they keep downgrading it. Then it got to 10 people. Then it was 4 people killed. Then it was 4 people or more killed or injured. So they moved the definition to call it a mass shooting. Now, I think. I think anyone being shot unjustly is a tragedy. But to change the definition so that you bump your numbers up is dishonest, is politricks. The other thing is that I think there's a copycat factor. You have a certain faction of people who want to make a big splash. They want to go out in a blaze of glory. They want to make a statement, or they just want the news media to constantly say all 3 of their names over and over again whenever there's a shooting. And so they choose that because they see it in the media and that's how they act out.
Oh, I definitely disagree with the whole media thing. It's such a terrible thing. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was the San Bernardino shooting. They said the police chief of the city was like, "I'm not gonna say this guy's name. I'm not gonna mention his name. I'm not gonna give him the time he wants." And immediately CNN was like, "Well, we have his name and we're gonna give it to you." It's just a sad state of affairs when it comes to our media.
Well, we haven't had real journalism in this country in a long time since Walter Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow died.
So fair enough. We've gone so long. We've gone so long. Hold on. We've gone so long. We have to take another commercial break. I'm very sorry.
No, that's okay.
But we do. We're at 20 minutes. We're at 2 hours and 14 minutes. We have to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
Jeremiah, and this is David from the God Theory Podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
I'm Dustin.
And I'm Wesley.
We host the Atheist Nomads Podcast.
We're godless geeks who take a skeptical look at
politics, religion, science, technology, and history.
We also interview leaders in the atheist, skeptic, and humanist community.
Check us out at atheistnomads.com.
That's atheistnomads.com.
Have a burning question? Want to share your thoughts with us? Think you know something that we would find interesting? Well, you're in luck. Send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. All your thoughts, interests, and help, just to drop us a line. Send us an email, cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com, for anything that you want to tell us or ask us, and we'll promptly respond. Now, please enjoy the rest of the show.
This is Matthew the Apostle from In the Name of God, the podcast. And you are listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Now, back to the show.
All right. And we are back. Everybody had to pee. I mean, after 2 hours and 15 minutes, people got to pee. It's just the way it is. So I had to let Hanna pee because that's just the way he works. And he's a Trump supporter, so he can't hold it as long as I can. It's all that. I don't know.
The scene when they wake him up, and he's done freezing him, and he pees for like 87 minutes. That was pretty much what I was getting.
Yeah. And so, anyway, we're going to come back here with more Cellar Door Skeptics. And we're going to be talking more about the gun control. And we're going to end this show. We have to. We got 15 minutes left. We're going to try and cram the rest of this into 15 minutes because that's just the way it works. And if you want, make sure you go over and support us on Patreon. You can find us over there at Cellar Door Skeptics. And you can just, for $1 a show, it gets Hanna a little bit better mic because, his cord vibrates and it sounds like shit because that's the way his microphone is. He needs a new microphone cord now because it keeps vibrating. But anyway, so let's move a little bit into a different set of discussions here, right? Let's talk about moral obligations, and then we got to end the show on talking about some sort of neutral legislation, because without neutral legislation, we can't succeed, right? So, Stu, you and I can both agree, right, that we have to find some sort of a neutral basis that you and I can at least agree on for how we can go forward. Is that correct?
Well, I think we need to stop talking past one another and find points of agreement. And by all means, if we don't take any action, nothing's going to change.
So I agree. I don't agree we're talking past each other. I just don't agree that maybe you don't like the statistics I have. And
well, I'm talking about the
yours
national debate.
Provided. So
I'm talking about the national debate. Again, I'm not talking.
You don't want to move to the worldwide debate. And in reality, you're right. In the national debate, gun statistics do show a lowered presence. It shows that we have gone down. We have gone down considerably compared to what we were, right? You know, I mean, gun violence in the 90s spiked and it's dropped. But worldwide, we're ahead of the game. We're on top of that statistic.
Well, again, there are way more guns here. So think about this. If you are intent on...
So if you want to reduce it, you get rid of the guns, right?
Well, no, because people will just choose another method. Think about this now. Timothy McVeigh didn't use a gun. None of the 9/11 hijackers used a gun. If someone is intent on doing something, they will choose another method. We just have a hell of a lot of guns. So if someone's intent on murder or suicide or committing a crime, they're going to choose it because it's available. But you think they're going to stop just because they don't have a gun? I would counter that anyone who has access to a hardware store has access to WMD.
Yeah, so you're right. But the statistics I showed, and again, so the problem is if we have another half-hour discussion about this, we're going to bore people.
Right.
Like we just are. The statistics I have specifically says that we still have a higher murder per capita rate with guns or without.
I just sent you the UNODC chart that shows you the 192 countries and where we fall.
Okay.
And as far as per capita homicide, we're not even the top 100.
Okay.
Despite all of our guns.
So the problem is I don't have the actual content behind it. So again, we can debate this for the next half hour and then end the show if that's what you want to do. Or we can try and move on to more commonplace circumstances and what we're going to do.
I think they've heard all they want from me. Where are you?
So,
what do you have in mind?
So we have to go forward because we don't know what can we do without legislation, right? And I don't know where you fall in the black.
Has its limits.
You're right, it does. But again, we have to find common ground because I'm not going to agree with you that everybody should open carry. I will not agree with you that you should.
Everyone should open carry.
I don't think that you should have assault rifles, and I don't think that assault weapons, such as the thing you held earlier, should be held that can legally shoot. I don't see a point in it. And I don't see it.
I don't see a point in making them illegal, though.
You're right, you don't. But I'm telling you, again, we can argue about the statistics behind it, and that's what we've done for the last 2 hours. And so I'm telling you, we have two options. We can argue about this for another 15, 20 minutes, and I'll end the show.
Well,
we can do that.
We have a real quick thing.
Come
on for a second.
You guys you're not going to get a second hand.
You both have an option. You have one way will go one way, the other one will go the other way, but we don't have the ability to test for 20 years to see the results. We kind of have to find a middle ground. That's the reason why I want to talk legislation right now.
That's exactly why I'm talking legislation, because we have to find a middle ground, because I don't agree with you and your statistics. I don't find what you've sent so far to be factually obligationary. If I could get the raw data, maybe I would change my mind. You're right. You don't have raw data. There we is it. And I didn't provide
it depends
you
on what we're talking about. The thing that I sent you just now came from the UNODC.
Again, we have two options we can go with this. And I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just trying to explain to you, we only have two options. And I'm not going to argue about whether legislation can fix everything or not.
What legislation you have in mind? What is it that you think would improve anything?
What do I think that can improve? There's lots of things I can think that can improve everything, but I think you have to lay a moral basis for this, right? And you have to lay a political basis and where political allies align. And it seems between you and I'm willing to give up more freedoms for the moral objective of surviving the largest amount of people. And I believe that there should be more.
Do you think that's the trade-off, though? Do you think we have to give up more freedoms to get that bargain? That's kind of Faustian,
I think the
don't you
statistics
think?
show that, though.
I don't think it does. I know you don't. That does it all. I think Benjamin Franklin was right that those who give up a little essential liberty for imagined freedoms deserve neither liberty nor safety.
And that's fine, except for the fact that I can demonstrate that black people are being killed on a higher rate and they have the same freedom as I do. The difference is there's a racial stereotype that's manipulating and killing those people. So I'm personally, with my privilege, going to give up more of my freedom to allow for more black people to be able to survive and not be murdered on my basis.
I think, though, that it's a noble gesture, but it's futile because nobody's dying because of you.
But it doesn't matter though, because
It
the
does.
majority. No,
If it
See, 'cause
did,
you can't
well,
take
then why
you
would
can't
you
take a
have to
national.
do anything?
So are you saying that what one individual does doesn't matter? Yes or no?
No, I'm saying that what you do has to have some way for it to work. You know what I'm saying? If you do a protest and nobody sees it, it's whistling in the wind. It's you might as well, have stayed home. What has to happen is efficacy. I think you and I would agree that if you want something to, if you're going to do anything, it should be effective. In other words, if you're going to deprive people of, you say, oh, I don't think you should have that assault-looking weapon thing because there, I can't imagine a reason for it. Well, what's the gain? What's the upside of that? How is it supposed to work that if you take that from me, someone is going to be saved? I want real efficacy. I think that whole background check idea, expanding it and putting it online and making it free and letting me run a background check just like the gun retailers, I think that's due diligence. I think that would stop more bad people from getting guns illegally. Okay, that would close that. Even if, I disagree with the statistic, but even if I didn't mince it, they say 40% of gun sales are private. Okay, that would close that door to them. Okay.
Do you think it should be mandatory that they have that then?
I think
so. You sell a gun, you should be mandatory that you do your online version of the background check.
Sure, why not?
Okay. Well, I will agree with you on that. There we go. I can agree with you on that.
That's a good place to start.
As long
that's
as it's
the in-between
free.
that
as long as it is free of charge, easily accessed, and there's no delay. They were having a cat about these guys who had sold a rifle because the FBI didn't manage to complete its background check in the 3 days it gave them. Well, the reason why it gave them 3 days was to give them time to run the check, if a human being actually had to look at it, and to do it with due diligence so that it didn't become a barrier. Because government, if they're allowed to delay, they'll delay and delay and delay. And your rights should not be held hostage to someone's malfeasance. So these guys let this gun get sold, and it turned into the Charleston shooting. And instead of blaming the FBI for their lackadaisical effort, they blamed the system and wanted, let's give them as long as they want. No, let's not, because they could effectively freeze all gun sales for as long as they wanted.
Sounds kind of like a conspiracy.
So we're basically,
no, but Lyndon Johnson warned us that you don't examine legislation and the benefits that it gives us if administered properly. You examine it in the light of the harm it could cause if administered by a later administration improperly.
So I actually agree with you on that statistic, because Pareto talks about that. In the business world, Pareto talks about the 80-20 rule. And you're right, we don't examine the good that's happening. You look at how do you eliminate the bad, right? And it basically says that 20% of the issues are 80% of the problem. And you and I can agree with that, because I would agree with you, yeah. If you had to look at background checks and somebody could they deliberately hold it up because they're anti-gun? You bet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we would have to look at the probability. Is the probability of that happening greater than the probability of pushing them through or shortening the days that would allow for more people to get killed because of shitty background checks? You would have to look at that.
I think that they have to, if they can't get them done in the time allotted, then they got to hire more people. They have to find a way to do the job. They had been doing it just fine up until then. I don't see what the problem was. And on top of that, we need to put teeth in the background check. We need to pick up these felons who try to buy guns. It's a 5-year felony. And leaving them on the street only makes things worse. So I think those two things would go a long way to closing all the loopholes. You wouldn't have a gun show loophole. You wouldn't have a private sale loophole. There would be no loophole for legal channels. That would close them all at once.
For that. Okay, so I would love for that small step, right? is what we were talking about earlier, what I mentioned earlier, is the slippery slope argument. People have said that we've changed anything, it's going to turn into a slippery slope where everybody's got
I've
sticks
never
in
used
England,
that argument.
right? Like this,
I don't use no
think would
true
be a slippery slope.
Scotsmans. I don't use the moving goalposts. I don't use.
Yeah.
I'm very well aware of the logical fallacies, and one of them is the fallacy, and that is claiming you're saying something fallaciously that when you actually have a valid point.
Well, I really just like the idea of, okay, so we're actually going to test something out. We have something that I would say the majority of the United States would basically agree on these things. And we need to get our legislators on the same board as, the average people. So there's a question here, is the populist is the populist perspective, we've heard nothing but in this political cycle, the populist perspective, the outsider candidate, when the beast of the population discovers that they have a voice and they overthrow the Madisonian principles, right? The overthrowing the minority of the opulent. We have to worry about that. Well, if the people across the United States basically say, okay, listen, we're okay with a little bit stronger background check. We're okay with that. Then the legislative branch just says no. I mean, and I can't remember what month it was. I think it was in May. They said no to all 4 of the gun bills that came through after the Orlando shooting.
Because of the way it was written.
Yes. And so, I mean, the arguments that it's like the way it was written and that kind of stuff, that slippery slope stuff, like, oh, in the future.
No, it's not. It's not. It's that de facto tax. It's the backdoor registration. That was another thing. They wanted to, you cannot effectively do background checks without some sort of at least temporary registration. And with the government, nothing is temporary. Now, I have no problems with them keeping the record of that felon they catch. But what kind of a bureaucratic morass and data collection nightmare would it be if you're keeping records on legal transactions by law-abiding people who are never going to be a problem? And if they are a problem, how does keeping that record? Okay, so you're going to go back and you're going to find that record. It has no preventative value. None. It will not stop a crime. It won't deter a crime. It won't solve a crime most of the time.
But this is the argument that I basically made against myself when I make this argument is, okay, how do we deal with the data? How do you feel with having a nationwide mental health statistic on all the people in the country? We're looking at, when it comes to like a data manipulation nightmare or whatever, it costs, personal freedom of information act, all these types of things are really included in here. And this is kind of where the future of the United States is going. We are going to have a database
privacy
of
is vanishing,
the people.
Yeah. Yes.
And these types of things are something we need to deal with. And I would say that the gun law, the gun freedom, all these types of things are all tied in. And it's something that, like I said earlier, the binary stuff, that banning all, the no open carry, like, as much as most people are usually okay with that, and a lot of people are really uncomfortable with that, when it comes to like the responsible gun ownership, dealing with, like I said, my brother-in-law is a gun carrier daily. Mm-hmm. No question, there's usually a gun on this person. And
Me too.
That has never been an issue. I mean, I've seen the good things that come from it. I have also heard of the bad things. They have never affected my life, thankfully. But I know that if I was a person who had been affected in the negative, in the adverse way, I probably personal, emotion and bias would go in the other direction. In the middle, I'm trying to find a healthy place between you and Tanner. Tanner is uncomfortable seeing the open carry gun law stuff, and you're probably much more comfortable with that. I'm trying to find a place where people are like, yeah, you know what, it's not a horrible thing, but I'm okay with it as long as it's properly and responsibly, taken care of. So, like, how do we get people more, I guess, interested in making sure that everything, so like the background check and whatever, so we can make sure it's safe for anybody who does. That's kind of my middle ground area. And as far as besides government regulation and checking and keeping track of all this stuff, this massive data problem, how can we get somewhere in between total gun freedom and safety for humanity? Or at least the United States anyways.
Well, we haven't had total gun freedom at any time that I can think of. Maybe the closest we got was during the Roaring '20s when all the gangsters were around. But even then, they were lawbreakers. So I can't think of a time when there was total gun freedom. But I will say that I like to go for the lowest hanging fruit. It's a big problem. Why don't we go for the big lowest hanging fruit? As I was saying, mental health you brushed on, suicide being the biggest chunk of the death by gunfire statistic. I think we need to focus on that. I think we need to devote more resources to getting people the help that they need, to have more access. You're
not a Republican, goddammit.
No, I'm not. I lean libertarian. And people think libertarian means ultra-conservative. No, it's ultra-liberal. I am an extreme liberal. And
we know, because we did that. We did the Politico test, right?
I've heard a couple of yours.
We didn't lean closer to liberal. We
were libertarian socialists.
I was socialist anarchist, closer than socialist libertarian.
Yeah,
and we proved that by having that conversation with Justin, because I don't agree with the libertarian philosophies at heart, because they leave behind too much of the social the social aspect of those that get left behind.
Well, Chris,
if we're trying to extend this show for about 6 more hours, we're definitely going to get into the libertarian.
You got 5
debate.
minutes, Hanna. You got 5 minutes.
Well, Chris Rock said it best. He said, "We all have shit that we're liberal about. We all have shit we're conservative about." He goes like, "When it comes to taxes, I'm conservative. Prostitution, liberal." and I think that's accurate. And I think we all have things that we're very libertarian about too. I think most of us want as much freedom as we possibly can have, as long as everyone's rights are intact. And
Noam Chomsky in his 1970 speech, you can find it on YouTube. He basically talks about the future of government, the socialist or libertarian socialist being what he is. And I mean, it's awesome stuff. We could definitely check that out. But I mean, what we've talked about here, we've gone through a whole pile of the gun debate. We've gone through what we're thinking, what you think, what Tanner thinks, and my messy middle ground. And because I'm all about the love and Trump hate. As far as
you love Trump, you got that wrong.
Well, either way, so Trump, I mean, it's the end of the show. It's the end of the show. We don't have too much time left. We want you to basically, let's replug a couple of things that, where can people find information about you? Where can people find information about your book? And we'll close out the segment and finish up the show.
Oh, well, thank you. I guess if you want to find information about my book, Google my name, or not my name, not Google. Go to Amazon or Barnes B&N or your favorite online book retailer, and just plug in Stu Chisholm. That's Chisholm like the trail, and it's called Knowing Guns. If you're in the Michigan area, or even if you're not, we have a Facebook group called the Godless Gunnies. If you're a atheist and you don't want to hear any proselytizing while you're at the range, and you want some friends to go with, then look up the Godless Gunnies. There's one called Godless Gunnies Detroit, where it was the first one, and that's where we plan our events in Michigan. But there's a national one too. It's just called Godless Gunnies, and you can start your own chapter if you don't have one. And that's all on Facebook.
We'll definitely have a link to Stu's stuff here, and also his last name, because it's Chisholm. Like, I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. Like, to really phonetically give it out, it's like CHISHOLM.
Yep. Unlike the John Wayne movie, they kind of simplified.
So, all right. So as we close up, thank you, Stu, so much for joining us tonight. It wouldn't be Cellar Door Skeptics unless we talked with somebody that opposed with Chris Tanner, because for fuck's sake, a lot of people do, but you got the privilege of coming on and having that conversation with us.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and I'm around, so you ever want to continue, I'd be more than happy.
Oh, cool. So thank you much for joining us tonight. Thank you everybody else who decided they wanted to tune in tonight and have that conversation with us, because it's an important conversation. Probably not as important as race politics, because there's a lot of black people being murdered today. And I'm not going to say they're being murdered by guns, but Stu and I both agree on that. They're murdered by police with guns. Stu and I both actually can agree on that. And we have a lot of friends that support the Black Lives Matter movement. And anyway, the whole point of the show is to bring two opposing point of views, make sure that we all understand that, hey, in the end, if Stu came to Grand Rapids, I'd have a beer with him. Well, I'd have a whiskey with him. I don't drink beer. And if I went to see Stu, I'd have a drink with him. And he's got a drink in his hand. And it's cheers to everybody else. So make sure you support more Cellar Door Skeptics, because next week, we're going to talk with a Christian apologist about how they recovered from their drug addiction through God's help. We'll have another science segment. We might even talk a little bit about more marijuana laws, because that's my favorite fucking topic right now, outside of how much Hanna loves Trump. So we'll be back with more Cellar Door Skeptics. You can find us on Facebook, on Spreaker, on iTunes. You can find us, I don't know, anywhere, Hanna, right? I think you can find us anywhere. But make sure you give us a rating on iTunes or on Spreaker. That way we know what you like, what you don't like. Send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. Tell us what you want for our anniversary show. And remember, prepare for the revolution, because it's coming to your neighborhood. Thanks, everybody, and have a great, awesome, amazing fucking night. Have a good night, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.